That'd be super. All right, here we go.
Shit.
All right. I think we are live. Let me make sure all the audio things are good on my end. It looks like everything is moving smooth like a sly devil. Ooh. But no, it looks like everything is good. Everything is running smoothly as should be. We're not getting no drop frames. The bandwidth is looking good. And speaking of looking good and feeling good, Paul, how you feeling, man? What's going on? Welcome to the backstage. Welcome, beautiful people.
Yes, sir. It is another Saturday morning, and we are back yet again for Living Split Screen. Welcome to the backstage. As Steele and I get ready to go live and get this thing rocking and rolling, man. Nice kind of break week-wise here, Steele. Not a huge week of news. We got a lot of news, but not a huge week. We didn't have any more stumbles for Xbox this week, so I guess that's something, right? That's something positive. It was actually a neutral week this week, but yeah, man, we've had a lot of interesting stuff go down, and we're gonna talk about it, Steele, because that's what you and I do here on Saturday mornings with Living Split Screen, where we give you the energy you need to get your day started the right way. But man, it is Diablo time, Steele. It is Server Slam time, which you are not partaking in, sir.
No. And there's been some interesting things that I've been hearing about that. Shout out to people like Asmongold and whatnot, people who have a pretty decent following. Apparently, there's some issues happening where they might have. I've also saw, oh no, it's Alex talk about it. I know he gets a little bit too over the top as far as like what's going on. And again, we are early on in Diablo. It can be slightly difficult to tell where the issues truly are because every build that hasn't always been the greatest early on. Some are good early, some others are much better later, and others fall off later. So it just depends. And again, with me not playing it, I'm gonna wait till release. That's perfectly fine with me. I mean, we're down to the point where we're 2 weeks away from release, essentially, almost 3 weeks away. So I'm not going to get in there, get any bad vibes. Again, I was playing a druid, and for the weakest class, and now again going to this Server Slam, people reiterating again, like, hey, the druid still doesn't feel good, at least from what I've seen, and it's not just them that I've seen that from. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I figured out the magic trick. I can't say early on I had a hard time, and it made me think about some things. But to hear that the Necro got nerfed into the ground, especially early on, it does open up some questions. But again, with Rod Ferguson being over there, I know he's not the end all to be all. But I do have good hope that everything is going to end up being where it needs to be. So I'll play it on release. And again, Diablo is also one of those games that does evolve over time, although that's not an excuse. I need Diablo, just like I need every other game, to come out on release and be a good game on release. So, that's what
we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, main takeaways that I've seen thus far is Necro, Druid, the classes have been nerfed. Necro's been nerfed into the ground, essentially. Doesn't feel as good as it did before. And of course, it shouldn't be as OP, but apparently it just doesn't seem as viable. And then Druid, they said it made it seem apparently it's worse than it was before. So I mean I don't know. Again, I had a good experience with it last time with the Druid. I know again early on it was kind of like weird, especially on a scaling standpoint. But outside of that, I don't know.
Okay, all right. I was that's curious. Like they said in their last dev direct, they're going to be watching the classes and they will be adjusting on the fly on a regular basis to make sure there's no one super class.
That's one thing. That's one thing that really kind of turned me off about that dev. But that part of it though, because you telling me that you're going to be constantly seeing and evaluating your different classes to see how they kind of mesh with each other, that doesn't give me the utmost hope, because I would think that you should feel confident about those things before you go into release, which is telling me that there is some truth behind what we are hearing about this game coming in kind of hot. The game is polished from what I've played of it, but again, this does not need to be a Diablo 3 situation where, okay, now we get the classes together, now everything where it needs to be 6 months to a year later.
Yeah,
You have a prime opportunity for Diablo to come back out on the scene and really, give much needed competition to the others out there, and maybe even take its crown back, compared to like a Path of Exile or Last Epoch or any of the other ones that you want to throw out on the table. It does, for me at least, it just seems like, and this is just something that I've spoke to before, I need the devs to make their game first. If you want to adjust your game after that because you see some things that are not in place, great. But so far, I have not seen them say, hey, this is our game. And then so we can judge them based off of, hey, this is not when you say, hey, we're going to be adjusting these things on the fly, this, that, and the other thing, because it just tells me, and it's the problem with MMOs, with different classes and whatnot, where the balance is off. Well, if there's a balance off and you guys know that in the background, or why don't you guys know that as the people who are working on the game? But again, sometimes it does take outside views to look at your art and say, hey, I see these issues with it. Maybe if you change these things, it'll be a better overall experience. And again, I'm not saying anything negative about Diablo itself, because a lot of the negatives that people were speaking to outside of the Necro being dumb strong, I didn't see past the upfront or past the first hour of the game. So that's the other aspect of it. It's just, I can understand why people are worried. Blizzard has had a weird track record here recently, over the years, over the last decade, to be real, but I got faith. I think it's going to be a good game come release, and I don't have any reason to not believe.
Yeah. Interesting. I didn't know anybody was saying that. So
yeah, I mean, that's like, there's millions of people who are like, I don't know, man. This is starting to feel a little weird. I had some confidence in it.
I definitely think there could have been an overreaction, obviously, and they debuffed too hard. I mean, that happens. We've seen that. Every game, right? Something shows up way OP, and they just freaking go the
complete opposite way.
It's not like a fine tune. It's like, that right off at the knee.
That's why it's like when you tell me, we're going to be looking at it closely. Well, how close? Because there's refinements, and then there's like, I need to pull up the concrete, like
right. We're just chopping it off. All right. Well, that's interesting, Steel. Because I'm running Rogue again.
Nice.
Because I wanted to see, because Rod did say this is basically the final build. I mean, they're not going to be able to
that's the other thing too about it,
gold.
right?
Like, it's going gold, like it's gone gold, so we're not changing a whole lot here. So I just want to see how it felt now, because we're not dropping legendaries like candy anymore. Like, this is like the true experience up front. And gotta say, once I got my poison back, absolutely love it. But they introduced more monsters, Steel, as well this time around. They definitely introduced more monsters. They introduced more named bosses with better abilities this
in
time
the dungeons
around.
Or just like throughout the
randomly
world?
In the world too.
Okay.
Randomly, you can come across like a regular old little ghoul, right? A regular old ad.
He has a name.
It's got a name, or he's got a buff like increased health.
Oh wow!
Randomly, and he's a much more spongy guy. Like, he takes a lot longer to take down. So yeah, that's been interesting, man. That's been pretty damn cool. Last night I got to level 19 and a half. Couldn't quite make 20 last night before I had to go to bed. So there was we did have some disconnect issues that we didn't have in the first beta, which was not like logging in, Steel. But like in the middle of group run on a dungeon, we get split up into separate groups. We'd be running 4, and then all of a sudden it'd be like 2 and 2, or it'd be 1 and 3, or we'd all get split up like randomly.
I wonder if there's something that they might have changed in the back end as part of this whole server slam thing. It might, and it could just be a bunch of different people logging in, and really causing an issue with the server. So again, I mean, if that's what it is, hopefully, like you said, though, we didn't have those experiences on the original beta, or I don't think they had those experiences even on the closed beta before that. No. So to see those things kind of happen now, at least to me, says they're stress testing or whatever. And I saw you guys talk about it a little bit last night where it was just like, well, maybe this wasn't the best weekend for that.
Yeah, no.
I think it is still a good weekend for it, mainly because just because Zelda Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, excuse me, is out.
Yeah.
I do think that they still feed a couple different audiences. And then when people take a break from Tears of the Kingdom, they can pop into Diablo for, you only getting to level 20. So.
Right.
It's not
It's not that big deal. No, but looking forward to it. Obviously, still day one. Like Steele just brought up some great points that I didn't know. I didn't see anybody talking. I mean, obviously, I was playing it, so I didn't see anybody talking about it. Steele was mining the information as always. So that's good news, man. That's good news. I mean, again, those things got to be said. Those things got to be talked about. And,
right.
We'll see how they respond.
And again, it's coming from your hardcore base, right?
Yes,
those
correct.
people who are going to be the ones spending hundreds of hours in the game. And they just want the best for Diablo, right? Especially for them going back to the Diablo 2 roots and seemingly doing a lot of the right things, making the world feel good, making the gameplay feel really refined, especially from at least what I've experienced. Again, I don't. From everything that I've seen and everything that I've heard, I'm still not deterred.
Oh, yeah.
But I am also somebody who played Diablo 3 on release and had a good time with it, right? I could be honest and say that the end game wasn't like the greatest. I didn't feel a reason to go back through like I did in previously in Diablo 2. But in Diablo 4, I do feel like it is going to be a much better than what got previous. Yeah. At least up front, and that's what I'm excited for.
Yes, sir.
Again, if I end up spending 100 hours in the game, I'm not regretting any playtime that I spent in it. It is what it is. If it doesn't live on for forever, that's kind of the thing with games these days. Not everything lives on forever, and again, not everything has to live on past 100 hours. It's a personal thing. I get it if it's not perfect past that 100-hour point. It's like, damn, at 100 hours, did I get my $60 worth? I think so.
Blizzard wants it to, though. So
I know. Of course.
They want this game to be around for 10 years.
Of course. And I would love to keep playing it, but again, if it's going to tell me that it doesn't value my time that I'm putting into it, again, I'm not just gonna sit here keep playing the game and complain. I'm just play something different. You know what I mean? I'm just not one of those guys that do. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's get into the beef of the show. We got a lot of hype things to get into, and for those curious who are joining us behind the scenes, I do have some gameplay of Punishing Gray Raven in the background today. It's an anime-esque, it is a gacha style game, but it's an action combat style. It's kind of in the same breadth of if people are familiar with Nier. It has the same kind of premise as far as the story goes and everything. And it's a really dope game. I'm having a lot of fun with the combat and whatnot, but I'll get into more in that as we get the show. So, with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, let's get into that intro music. And thank you all for joining us here live and getting locked in. All right, let's get into it. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, beautiful people. How y'all doing on this Saturday morning? Right here locked in with Living Split Screen, your Saturday morning cartoons, or I like to consider the home of that RTS approach, that view that very few don't tend to get into. I'm starting to notice that even more and more as we get rolling into this whole podcasting thing and being involved in the community thing that we got going on, that we've been doing for about 102 episodes at this point, right? But as the home of that RTS view, for those who aren't familiar, that's real-time strategy, pulling yourself out of the world, looking at the darker crevices of the map and pulling those resources together so that we can hopefully talk to those 3 billion gamers that Phil always talks about. We're also the home of that ECP, the educated consumer perspective, because we're not lawyers, we're not in the gaming industry or anything like that. Me and Pong are just gamers who've been doing this for quite some time, a few decades here, and at least between us, and also just have professional experience in the business world, sales, customer service, knowing how people think, some psychology that goes into the psychologies that go into that. So that's where we come from. With that said, I am one of your hosts at Steel Rain. That's I, Steel Rain I. That T is a 7. Wherever you would like to type that into, you'll be able to find me. But I have to introduce one of the most uncanny gentlemen that I have met in recent years. He is a brother from another to me personally. He is the X-Men who is not Cyclops. He's not cowering in a corner. He's not afraid to take off his shades and slap a fool. My guy, Pong. Oh, how you feeling, brother, man?
Man, I always feel better after you give me one of the famous Steel Rain intros every Saturday morning here on Living Split Screen. Man, it always gets the juices flowing. We just had some backstage talk going on. Listen, I'm doing great, Steel. I am here. It is a cloudy, rainy day up here in Minnesota. But you know what? Right here, it is bright. It is lively, and we are ready to get down to business because we got things to talk about this week for sure. Listen, gaming wise, first of all, happy Tears of the Kingdom release week to all you Nintendrones out there, all you Zelda heads, all you wonderful Nintendo fans. Listen, everything that we talked about 2023 being potentially one of the GOATs, one of the greatest all-time, if not the greatest all-time year of gaming. When we talk about that, it definitely isn't from one perspective. It's not from one platform. It's a combined effort. And of course, we talked about knowing that Zelda Tears of the Kingdom was probably going to come out to rave reviews. It was going to be what everybody wanted. And that's exactly what it looks like happened. Whether I am interested, which you all know I'm not, or not, does not matter. It's part of the celebration of the golden age of gaming and what it means right now to be a gamer in the number one entertainment industry in the world. And Nintendo did exactly what they needed to do. They showed up with a front runner for Game of the Year, right? Mm-hmm. That's what they did.
As they should.
That's what they did. The sequel, they did exactly what you want from a sequel. Yeah. Build upon what made Breath of the Wild, to some people, the GOAT. They took it, expanded upon it, gave you more mechanics, gave you more of everything, basically, at this point, from all the reviews that I'm reading. Again, I will never know because I will never play it because I have zero interest in Zelda, but everything I'm seeing is fantastic. So happy Tears of the Kingdom release week. Huge moment. Obviously, as we were talking backstage, happy server slam for all of us Diablo fans who are jumping back into the beta one last time to help Blizzard get things right for day one. Hail Lilith. Mother is back, and my God, does it feel good. If you weren't backstage with us, Steel did say that there are some hardcore people like Asmongold and oh no, it's Alex, and obviously I appreciate those guys because those guys do come from the perspective of the extreme enthusiast when it comes to something like specific games, and Diablo being one of those. Again, it's a beloved franchise of mine, but I don't have that enthusiast look about games. Like I do, but I don't have that extreme. Like, I'm not nitpicking games. If a game comes out, no matter if it's a beloved franchise of mine, Elder Scrolls, it doesn't matter. Right. If it's got issues here and there, I'm not one of those people that are going to say, oh, God, I can't play this anymore, blah, blah, blah. Like, I'll do it when they do a dramatic shift, like Saints Row did in certain areas. They do a dramatic shift in tone of a game. Then I'll come out and, like, talk about it. But for the most part, I play a game because I want to play a game and I just love it and whatever.
Right.
So I'm having a great time in
Makes
Diablo. Yeah, no, it is what it is. And again, I don't begrudge those people. That's a part of it, right? We see it with the Halo fan base. We see it with any big fan base. You're going to have people who are unhappy with the direction the game is taking. But I played again last night. Of course, as everybody knows, Steele already said he's not going to play it up to launch.
Yeah,
we just talked about that backstage, which is obviously I totally understand. I'm not going to hate on Steele for not playing the beta again. It's a beta. It's a beta, for God's sakes. No, people don't like being beta boys, as King calls them, right? So it's fine. But I'm having a great time in there. I wanted to see this because Ferguson in the last Dev Direct said this is as close to the final build as we're going to get. Like, this is like basically the final build is what Ferguson was saying. So I want to see how my main class was going to play. That's what I'm using this for. Now that we're getting normal drop rates in this one, this is, again, drop rates. It's the first couple betas for anybody who didn't play. Legendaries were dropping like candy. At points, at like everywhere.
Did you notice the difference?
Oh, yeah.
Major?
Yeah.
So
it's nice when you get the yellow, when you get the rare drop now. It's like, oh, I got a yellow, and we're not even talking legendaries yet.
Feels impactful.
Yeah. Jasper, who put more hours, he's
almost like a second class or third class.
He was maxed out pretty much like early on yesterday. He was at level 20. He got his first legendary, not from a monster drop, but from the coin lady in town.
Really?
Trade those.
Wow.
So that's how he was running.
It does have a chance to give you that. So it's like, to see those mechanics at play, like you can kind of do, if you haven't got anything out in the world yet, oh, here you go. But typically early on like that, I'm not expecting to get like a bunch of legendaries anyway, typically in Diablo.
No.
So anything that you do get, is going to be impactful to your gameplay as you move forward, right?
Especially at level 20. We're talking about a game that brings you all the way up to level 100, right? So,
exactly.
It's one of those things.
Higher after pair with Paracon.
Yes. So it was cool, but like I said, it brought back the old feeling again, Steel, where even when a yellow dropped early game, it was like, oh, okay, cool, right? I got probably 5. I'm probably almost decked out in yellow now, but it still gave that feeling like it was meaningful, and you were like, oh, surprise. Whereas during the beta, it was like, get this yellow out of here, man. Give me my orange. Give me a legendary. Legendaries are dropping everywhere. So that was interesting. They added more creatures, as I was telling you guys behind the stage. They added a lot more creatures to this, which was, again, very cool to see.
So did the world feel more filled? Or were there just more variety of creatures?
More variety, but definitely walking through the open world. I got to say, maybe they increased the mobs. Also, Jasper, Jasper ran into some different things because Jasper.
Oh,
Again, where he was and he's running stuff. Randomly in a dungeon, all of a sudden it put up a warning on his screen and said mob inbound or something like that.
Okay.
And all of a sudden, this huge mob of skeletons was charging him like out of the blue, like a random encounter, like just happened.
That's kind of dope.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. Again, I didn't see it because I was playing, but we were in chat together and we were all running single because me and Cycle were trying to level up. And so all of a sudden he's like, oh, what's going on? What's happening here? So there's stuff like that that's happening that we didn't see in the first betas. Like I said, there's more named, like, I'm not even gonna call them like mini bosses, like leaders of your mob, right? You get a lot more named. They have elemental aspects to them, or like I was telling you behind the scenes, Steel, you can even have like a ghoul, like a regular old ad, like a nobody, like fodder. And all of a sudden he'll have an aspect where he's got more health than the rest of them, right? And so, So there's a lot more of that, a lot more elemental attacks coming against you. I'm already sick of ice. I'm already sick of ice guys.
Is it slowing you down? Like freeze you, or does it just slow you down? Oh wow, okay.
Like it'll slow you down, but if you get hit by one of their big ones, you're instantly frozen.
Damn.
Oh, God, it's annoying as hell right now, man.
I'd imagine.
Oh my God.
That's good though, because you anticipated for it to work like that. If I can do it to the enemies, I expect for the enemies to be able to do the same thing to me.
And they tweaked certain bosses for sure. Like first boss, Steel. You remember what kind of? I mean, we could still beat the first boss, that first main dungeon
Was that
during
Brood
intro.
blood, whatever it was?
Yeah, that demon dude that shows up. Yeah. He was a little tough out the gate, like a little bit. I mean, all things considered, he was a little tough for being like your first.
I mean, I was the druid and struggling with him, so I mean, I get.
And I was the rogue, and I had to run around for a long time. They tweaked him down.
Okay.
They debuffed him, so they've done that. They buffed up some of the other bosses as you're going through, make them much tougher. They've tweaked special abilities for some of the bosses.
Okay.
We were seeing stuff we didn't see. So
that's dope.
Yeah. So this is definitely closer to final build. So if you want to jump in and kind of see where Diablo is going to be at launch, go check this out. Like I did say in the backstage, we did have some weird. There was no problems logging in. No queue, nothing.
That's really good.
Don't know if that's Tears of the Kingdom or if that's just they've got the servers handled and they're doing a much better job.
First night, Friday night, Saturday nights when you can really tell.
Yeah, we'll find out tonight.
We'll find out.
But we did have some weird issues where we were playing grouped last night, 4 of us, and we were running a certain mission, and we'd be like halfway through or partway through the mission. All of a sudden, we go to the next area and we get split up. And our group would be basically disbanded. And some of us would be put at the beginning. Some of us would still be in the area we were supposed to be going to. So there was some of those weird things that we didn't see in the early betas. But again, this is what this is for. I'm sure they're watching that. I'm sure they're seeing it. So yeah, no, having a great time there. Otherwise, regular games this week. Age of Wonders 4.
Still in it?
Yeah, man. This is the best 4X strategy game. This is already. I know. We're always. What have you done for me lately? So it's always for us gamers. It's like we don't. If you give us something new or interesting, sometimes it creeps in where it's like, is this better than every other game?
I think what it is, Pong. Because you're about to dive into Age of Wonders 4, right? I think the problem is that but Age of Wonders 4 is not God of War.
Would you stop? So there's some of that happens. There's some of that happens, bro.
So it doesn't matter. Okay.
But I gotta say, Age of Wonders 4 is already, and again, it's coming from a dude who didn't play PC. So again, am I the 4X strategy king who's been playing 4X strategy games for 30 years nonstop on PC and experienced the best? No, of course not. But I have played Civ. I love those games. I love 4X strategy games. Age of Wonders 4 is slowly moving its way up the list towards the top of my all-time favorite 4X strategy games already. Like, this game, hands down, is some of the most fun I've ever had, and that includes Civs, right? So, really something special here from Triumph Studios. Yes, the performance issues they do have to patch out. It's not, again, I haven't had any game-breaking stuff. I haven't had any crashes, none of that stuff yet. And I've put a lot in already, a considerable amount already. But I'm loving Age of Wonders 4. And then also I'm rocking all a bunch of stuff. But Shadow Warrior 3, I'm close to finishing it still.
Okay.
You know me, that's rare. But I love the Shadow War series, and it's a perfect pop in, play, hop, get through a level, pop out. They've got it set up perfect. It's not that. I wish it still had the open world of Shadow Warrior 2, but Shadow Warrior 3 is really, really good. It's in Game Pass. It's got the current gen patch on it. It's beautiful in a lot of ways. It's a really gorgeous game, and I'm having fun. And Steel, I'm getting close to finishing it. And I said this on PM to PM. Even more rare, Steel, I might wind up 1,000 out of 1,000 on this.
Really?
Yeah. That's
accidentally, or you've been looking at it?
No, I look at them, of course, because even though I'm not an achievement hunter, I still like achievements popping, right? Obviously.
If you like it enough, so the fact that you're even looking at it and be like, oh, what do I got to do now?
And they've got it set up.
Cool.
Like certain devs do a great job setting up the achievements. Like some
the game?
Want you to run. Yes.
So that makes it even easier, right?
It makes it even easier, and it's nice progression. Sure, I play differently than a lot of people, so there are some where cumulative achievements where you got to kill so many things or whatever the case. Like, those things are going to happen for me because I wind up doing more than a lot of people do in my first run. Some people, it takes 2 runs to do this, but there's only one achievement I don't know if I can get by the end. There's only one I don't know if I can get by the end. But yeah, that's how much I'm loving Shadow Warrior 3. So if you still haven't popped that in, you want that Doom light experience, this game will give you that Doom light experience. Plus, it's still got comedy. It's humorous. It's funny. I'm still laughing at it, even though it's not the same as Shadow Warrior 2. They did tone it down a little bit. It's still hilarious if you like that adolescent comedy. Right. So yeah, no, that's what I've been rocking out, Steel. So, sir, what have you been doing, man?
All right. So
I don't even know.
There's been a couple things.
Yeah.
One is something that I've kind of been off and on about over the years, and then yeah, I mean OCD gamer. Yeah, it's only conversation, but I say that because that's kind of hinting at what I'm going to talk about. So on one end, I did end up jumping into Skyrim. This is something that I was talking to Pong about in the background.
That's right.
And I've actually, because Pong, I actually tried 2 more times after the conversation we had. So nonetheless, one, I did get a chance to jump into Skyrim for my first time ever this week. Now, I will be honest and say I did have some frustration getting into the game because I am playing with mods. The most recent version that I had had about 777 mods to improve gameplay mechanics and the world, the visuals, and all that stuff.
PC is a different world.
If you look at videos, it looks like it's a completely different game.
Oh yeah, no, yeah.
So that's one. 2, I have come to the realization that I just think that Skyrim is too much of an older game for me to go back to. Because even the mods, and maybe it's because I got to spend more time really refining and finding what mods are working with what, and really making sure that I have it working the way that I would like it. But I don't have the time or the patience to sit there and do that. Now, I did opt in for a different version, which is how I got to the over 700 mods that I was able to get. It was like over 100 gigs worth of mods.
Yeah.
It was like a one click type of thing. Hey, one click, download everything, boom, you got. And that was one of the best experiences that I had thus far. And I ended up spending that last time that I did it. I spent about 4 hours in the game.
Okay.
Consistent. I was like just in it.
Yeah.
So there's a couple different things. The reason that and Superman, that's exactly what I did. That's where I got the collection from. I'll say I don't get why people are so obsessed with like the nudity in Skyrim. It's weird. Like I realized that that's what the immersive and adult thing was after I downloaded it, because it was like, oh yeah, there's some nudity. I didn't know it was as blatant as it was. I was like, all right, I'm not into this, so I downloaded the other version. That's supposed to be more pure or whatever.
Right.
I was just like, because I started playing, I was like, oh, this is like abrasive nudity. Like it's like purposely put in your face. But it is what it is. I shouldn't have expected that. But I downloaded the other version, and that was the version that I was getting into, spending some time with, and I was having a good time. Now, the thing that turns me off most about Skyrim, because I like to play in third person. The first person camera is a complete turn off for me. I don't get that aspect of the game. I don't. That's just me personally, though. I know other people do, and I get it because it does make it feel immersive. I mean, the times that I did put myself in the first person, whether it was like to talk to somebody, because some of the mods had weird issues with the camera or whatever. So I would like be zoomed into my character's back in third person. Nice. I couldn't see the person I was talking to. I had to adjust my analog stick so I can barely see their face. It was weird. But anyway. So first person is not for me. So nonetheless, I could say if Starfield was first person, it probably wouldn't have been for me. But third person, I really enjoy. Now, one comparison that I have to make, and the biggest reason why, and we're probably going to talk about this for a second, because I want to understand whether it's a me problem or whether I'm doing something wrong. But nonetheless, the biggest comparison for Skyrim that I can make to a game that I also played recently is Dragon's Dogma. The reason I make that comparison because they kind of feel similar in a lot of ways. outside of Dragon's Dogma having more combat mechanics, right? And I only say that with mods. Skyrim, I can imagine from what I've played, remember from Elder Scrolls, if that's how Skyrim played before, when I played Elder Scrolls Online, if that's how it played before, then it's kind of like, okay. So I wouldn't be able to make that comparison without mods because obviously it plays differently. But nonetheless, so like what I'm speaking to is more so like the sense of exploration. You just pick in a direction. Maybe you do that first mission because you could do that Whiterun mission, right? And then it tells you, oh, you got to go get this Dragonstone. Me and people like myself, Pong, and other people who like to adventure in their games because we like to enjoy the games for what it is, right?
Yep.
Might get yourself into some trouble. Or fighting things that you're not supposed to, right? I found myself in a couple situations like that. I also think that one of the mods that I have kind of changes stuff up because when I die, I get teleported in a different place. Some of my armor is stolen, and I got to go fight the person that last killed me. Now, if they're higher level than me, then I'm effed. So
that's a mod.
Yeah, that's what I figured. So I had that aspect that I was kind of fighting against, but it made it feel slightly Souls-like, right? So that it was I can see how that could be enjoyable. Yeah. The darkness, like nighttime for me, was extremely dark. Can't barely see. I can relate to that in Dragon's Dogma at least. And that could have been a mod that was making it seem that way. Because nighttime is extremely dark.
Yeah. No.
Like Dragon's Dogma dark. Like you need to have a lantern, some type of light to walk out, to do anything.
Yeah. No.
And even then, it's like I can't see shit. I could get ran up on right now, and I wouldn't even know. I'm over here looking around, looking for vampires, just because I know that stuff is in this game. But I'm looking around like, yo, I might get attacked, and then a fucking dragon flies above me, and I'm like, oh god. Here we go. And then he starts breathing fire. I'm like, oh god, here we go. So I get myself into a situation. The thing about Skyrim overall for me is definitely the combat. If the combat was better, the melee combat especially, with the mods, it does make it better, but you could tell, at least for me, it's still off, especially when you compare it to newer games. And I can honestly say that I am jaded by newer games because that's how games should be. Skyrim came out a decade ago. Games have progressed in how they play overall since then. Yeah. So that makes sense. But the other side to it also is, I think what my biggest issue is the time investment versus like what I feel like I'm getting accomplished.
Sure.
Because especially with the mods, like I just explained to you, it does feel like I'm regressing a lot, right? Going to an area, I'm having an issue with the combat for whatever reason. I die to whatever stupid ass reason. And then I get reset. So now I'm losing stuff. It's like, oh, okay. Now, this mod also made me realize what does make these games special, though. Because everywhere that I was going, the interactions were on key. They were on point. Right. Like I'd walk by somebody, they would address me. If I was, talking to somebody else, other people would look around like they're curious about what I'm doing here. Like, obviously, because I also chose, I created I don't know if this is in the base game, a half dragon.
Nope.
But yeah, it's like a half dragon. I mean, even the people in the game are like, oh, you're a half-blood dragon or whatever the case might be. And they got lore behind that and whatever the case, and it made it work. So I thought it was part of the regular game. But anyway. So overall, I can't say that, Skyrim is just a bad game. That's not what it is. What I do think that it is just because of years of gameplay changes, there's a certain amount of jank that I just can't see past, right? Yeah. And the fact that I have to have 700 mods for me to even enjoy the game at a base level, again, I also feel like would tell me enough. Because that tells me if I'm doing all this with 700 mods, if I take the mods away, I do think that it would like take away from my experience. I already feel this way about the combat. The combat's just going to become even more simpler than it was before. Again, it's from its time. Overall, the biggest reason I wanted to talk about this and why I wanted to is one, again, I do think that it's just a me problem. Because I also was playing on a harder difficulty. That's I added an addition. Playing on expert, I think. Or whatever. So I mean, but again, I was having a good time.
Sure.
But it was just like, it was little things, mainly just the combat for whatever reason. It wasn't, and I played with the controller, so it was just like, it just wasn't where I needed it to be in comparison to other games. And it's super unfortunate. Nix is like 700, damn, still they're gonna need 300 for Starfield. See, but the thing about Starfield is it's a modern game. And from what we saw from the third-person gameplay already, whether people want to give that credit or not, already tells me from what I'm playing currently, it's leagues and bounds better than even the Fallout 4 is, right? And I played Fallout 4 when it came out. I played it for like a few hours, and I got to a certain point. I think I got to the point where you actually get your vault suit or whatever, like the metal suit.
Yeah.
Then I stopped playing. I was like, I
power armor.
I did add the factions mod in Skyrim. I see the other thing too is I put a lot of limitations. I'm really weird when I'm a gamer, right? Just because the other thing in the mod of Skyrim is they put you in this central place. You can get all this gear. You can do all these things. You can decide what class you want to play. You can pick a faction. And it's just like, that's cool. And I can get, if people who have played this game want to do those things. No, I want a weapon. I want a decent set of armor. I don't want the best. I want a class, and I want to jump in whatever the starting point is. So if the starting point is Whiterun, that's where I started at. I know it's a little bit before that, and I even went back to the original location because I did play through that, and I wanted to see what was different, right? So I can make sure I wasn't missing anything. Because I still wanted that story there. In OCD, like, I get that the combat isn't what attracts most people to Bethesda games.
Yeah.
But also, there wouldn't be as many mods that are put into Bethesda games if that was the end all to be all. A lot of the mods are just that. Quality of life and things to make the combat in the game feel better. That's what most of the mods are. Outside of the nudity and looks and big boobies and
I think it's good context to once again remind people, Steel, and I'm doing this for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
That you were a multiplayer only gamer.
Well, yes.
You at one point in your life,
I'm not playing.
Right. You were at one point in your life, you actually looked down on single player gamers.
Not necessarily down on them, but it was just that's what I considered the casual, right?
We've had the casual, correct. We've had this conversation plenty of times between you and I, and that's the perspective. You only recently started really getting back into single player games, right? And actually appreciating certain single player games. Again, this man had never played Mass Effect until the remake came out,
last year. So
right, exactly. So
again, I wasn't even aware of it like that.
Right, it is good context for the conversation, and there's nothing wrong with it. There's plenty of people like you, and of course, Bethesda, just like every other game we talk about, name your game, name your most popular games. Not everybody feels the same way about those games, right? Spider-Man, it don't matter. We have these big games that everybody thinks like everybody plays. No, no, that's not how it works. There's no singular game that every single gamer has to play or does play. So it is. It's fascinating to hear you talk about this stuff because again, I know the perspective you're coming from because of all the conversations you and I have had on the show and behind the scenes. I know exactly where you're coming from. And so it is just interesting to hear you talk about Skyrim from somebody who didn't ever invest the time into it early on. Like, you know, it is different. It is different, man. It's not. Bethesda games, and that's why, you know, OCD gamer, that is always, that it's one of the big dividing lines. there are people who have jumped into a Bethesda title and jumped out
Like I said,
because of the combat alone.
I don't know
Yes.
what's so different from Elder Scrolls Online.
Right.
Maybe it is the cooperative aspect that
Yes.
made it different. But I'll be also honest and say the first 100 hours of Elder Scrolls Online I played by myself.
Right.
So I don't know whether it was just timing, because, you know, I do have, again, Elder Scrolls Online is also a newer game compared to Skyrim for me. It has a lot of those same aspects, and again,
the combat is pretty similar.
And the combat is pretty similar. In the way that's without mods, right? I played that on console, right? I played it for what it was at the time. But maybe it was that aspect that if I had other people around me that I could at any point jump in with, that kind of enhanced the experience or gave me more of a reason to keep invested. But there was something else to it, and I don't really remember, because I don't remember the most about Elder Scrolls Online outside of the time that I put into it. I can't tell you what made that work or what made this one work currently. Sure. The only thing that I can say is with the many mods that I'm putting on the game, I know that at the base level of the game, especially with how I'm trying to play it, I probably wouldn't end up enjoying. Correct. But that does not take away from the world building.
Oh no.
The characters. I mean, the first Jarl that you move in, that you talk to, he's a fucking cool. I thought he was fucking a dope character. You know what I'm saying? The interaction that you have. I mean, it's so fucking kind of basic, and everybody might have had that interaction, but it was just like, okay, cool. And then the interactions that follow after are super dope. Yeah. Needless to say, Starfield is doing things, because Starfield is back in the conversation this week too, with us getting some rumors about ID Soft coming in with help out with the gunplay mechanics and everything. And again, gunplay mechanics, and that's something that, again, apparently Redfall is still lacking in, something I mentioned previously. But again, another game that previously Arcane has not always been the strongest in that category. So it is what it is. But overall, that's a different situation. But with this, I think the difference is, again, from what we've seen from the game, there is so much more attention to not only detail, but I think of the various ways to play. Sure. And I do think that the Bethesda and Todd have both looked at this since Skyrim and said, all right, how do we truly evolve the experience? And I do think that that's something that at least Breath of the Wild probably has at its advantage, and it's that balancing the gameplay with the world, right? And I do think that Starfield is going to end up hitting that nail on the head, because even from the gameplay that we saw previously, if the gunplay is much better than from what they're stating, if it's leagues better than what it was previously, I thought the gunplay previously looked decent. Again, it's a Bethesda game, it's gun mechanics. I'm not expecting it for it to be Halo or something else all of a sudden. No, but even in third person, when they were playing it, it seemed okay. Like, it didn't seem terrible, but if it's even better than that, I have a lot of hope. Along with the world building, again, making me feel I am somebody who likes space. So if you put something in space and you start saying that, hey, this is the future. Let's look at space exploration. Oh, you could be a pirate. Oh, you could be Han Solo. Oh, you can create your ship. Oh, you can create bases. Oh, you got worlds to explore, and you still have a story. Those are the things that do pique my interest about Starfield, and why I don't say that, oh, Bethesda games just aren't for me, they're boring, because that's not the case. If that was, I wouldn't have spent that hundreds of hours I spent in Elder Scrolls Online. Right. That was before I even jumped into PvP. Right. So there is some magic there, and I wanted to jump back into Skyrim to kind of wrap this topic up, because I wanted to see why people consider the game so great, right? Well, obviously, I cheated a little bit. I cheated a lot. And I played with mods. So again, no matter what, I'm still not getting that original experience. And I'm just hoping for Starfield that the gameplay mechanics, the loop, really pulls me in.
Right.
Because I am. It's one of those things where it's like, I don't want to say like I'm amping myself up, I'm overhyping myself for it.
No.
But because of games like Mass Effect, because of games like Dragon's Dogma, for example, when you're able to blend different aspects together and fill it with a good gameplay loop. And again, OCD says in the chat, well, the combat's not the focus of Bethesda games.
Yep.
I see what you're saying, but at the same time, I do think that there has been a focus on that, but it was just slowed down, right? Where you had VATS, I've watched my wife play. You know what I'm saying? The combat sometimes it looks oversimplified in some aspects, but in other aspects, when she got into the gunplay or whatever, she was shooting at somebody, she's lining up her shots, and she's like, "Oh, I'm gonna shoot his leg off," and how much damage is it going to do, and oh, what kind of gun am I using? Oh, is it going to evaporate his leg with this gun, or is it going to blow it off? Like that aspect of it too, and in the slow motion, it's like they combine so many. It's like they're combining so many games together into one. It's going to be interesting in what they do in a game that is not going to have those mechanics in play. That does seemingly have a focus on pirating and shooting, and because again, like you could say that, oh, that's not Bethesda's focus. Obviously, it's the focus this time around because that's what they've shown us. They didn't show us, oh, look at this world and look at these conversations and look at these people. And no, they showed us some mining, some combat. It's they showed us what the adventure is supposed to look like. The best way that I can explain. You're on mute, Paul.
God, I hate when I do it. It's a jack of all trades, right? It's a jack of all trades. And this one, like you said, Steele, is going to be, and I said this long ago, without VATS. Because that was the whole thing. Because if you talk to people who played Fallout, sure, there are some people who say, no, the combat's fine. But there's a lot of people who say, well, without VATS, the gunplay is like,
I mean, yeah, I can see
it. Right? It's like legit, like not very good.
Right.
So now that you are doing a Starfield, which won't have the advantage of having VATS as one of the mechanics, now you're talking about doing more of a Skyrim, Elder Scrolls type combat system, obviously with guns, but that means there will be more focus on how do the guns handle? How are they unique to each one? Is there punch to those guns? Those questions will come into play in 2023 now. Like you said, Steele, we're well beyond those, early years where, things that Bethesda were doing could be overlooked, or people were just like,
no,
hey,
they were.
This is what we're used to, right? This is what we're used to. There is more emphasis now. And I'm not saying that that's what Bethesda is going to do, but if they did bring in id, which we'll talk about, it does make sense that they would do that because that gunplay is going to be more important this time around without an extra VAT system overlaid on top of it. So, and the other thing I wanted to say too, Steele, is while you were talking there, the interesting thing is, because you were talking about how you're playing with 700 mods, and that changes the experience versus what we get.
Right.
What's interesting about Bethesda games is this has always been the case,
right.
Steele. There have been two sets of players. There have been the PC players that have access to the mods, and there have been the console players where we didn't get anything.
Or you're very limited.
Yeah. Very limited, right? But you go back to Oblivion, we got 0 mods, right? You go back to Morrowind, we got 0 mods.
Nothing. Right? You just had the game.
Right, we had the base game. But you still have people in both sets that consider Bethesda games the GOATs, right? And so there are people who have you said cheated. I don't call it cheating.
Not cheating, but
it's an advantage for PC.
It's not the
players.
same experience.
No, it's not the same experience. But you had people who got the base experience that still, like me, love the games, right? Absolutely beloved. And you still got people on the PC side who get the mods and they get the extra experience, who also love that side of things. So there's a grand mix here, which shows the magic of Bethesda. that it's not one side or the other who love the game.
Right.
You don't necessarily have to have the mods to be a Bethesda fan or to think that they're the GOATs. So I think that's where the magic is found. And again, it's not going to be for everybody. These games aren't for everybody. And I am hoping that your experience with Starfield is going to be that Bethesda title that pulls you in from day one. When there are limited mods or you're playing on console with no mods, that you say, oh, okay, all right, yeah, this is my type of game. Bethesda made my game. I get it now. Because I think you're going to have also the unique perspective, Steel, because you just recently put a lot of hours into No Man's Sky, which is a space adventure game minus that core
story
narrative, that core narrative,
making you care about the universe.
Right, exactly. So it's going to be interesting because there are going to be differences, right? We're going to be able to fly around in space, but we're not going to be able to control the landing.
And it's not as grand as people try to make it seem anyway.
No, it's not, but it is a different experience. So you're going to have that unique perspective as somebody who's recently played it. So I can't wait, man. I really hope this is the one. Again, if it winds up not being it, that's okay.
I mean, it is what it is. That'll be okay too. But I mean, I do think that it does speak to the conversation of why people are. I keep saying that. Oh well, this Bethesda game, it needs to hit. It has to hit. But again, like OCD Gamer mentioned, he says, hey, well, I play the Bethesda games for the exploring and the story.
Yeah.
And in that aspect,
that's me, OCD.
I think this game made me realize that these types of games have to do the combat right for me also to have me super invested. It's not just about customization. It's not just about story. It's not just about being able to explore. Because that's the other thing in Skyrim that's also kind of limited. It's like you can't climb on anything. So it's like I'm like, and you can't jump multiple, bro. I was trying to jump on shit, like climb over rocks and shit.
Bro, that's the famous. Well, okay, I don't know where you were at, what you were doing. Yes, there are certain areas. But that was like one of the fun parts about Skyrim was finding the weak points in the mountain that you could go where you weren't supposed to be able to go by jumping.
Maybe it was the mods that prevented it. But I would get into a certain, like I'm talking, bro. I know the kind of mountains you're talking about, Pong. I'm about that. I do that shit in Zelda all the fucking time. Yeah. I was doing that shit in Breath. I do that in fucking every open world, regardless. If I can go up the mountain, I'm going up the mountain. Especially if you give me the mechanics to be able to do so, whether that's jumping or whatever, we figure it out. Yeah, I'm gonna force my way up this fucking mountain. I want to see what's up here. I tried to take that same approach, and it was just like maybe it was the mods, but it was like I would try to jump multiple times. He would jump the one time, and then if I wasn't at a certain angle, he wouldn't jump again.
Yeah. Like, oh no, there's plenty of that. Again, it's it's a skill, bro.
I was like, what the fuck is going on in this goddamn game? I was like, this is like the easiest little angle I should be able to get up, and he's not doing it multiple times. So there was that.
It's fun. It's fun.
Oh, and OCD again. I've already said I'm already going to be day one on Starfield. I'm gonna try. I'm gonna jump in.
Steel's gonna be there. Steel's going to be there. Creation Engine 2, this will be the first game out with their new engine, with their updated engine. And it's going to be interesting to see what changes and what stays, right? That's going to be another cool part, is to see how it's evolved, what new mechanics they put in. Does it have the same feel as the old Bethesda titles? Does it change? It's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, no, and 100%. And this isn't about wrong opinions, but I wanted to come on here because, again, Skyrim is a renowned game. Like everybody knows what Skyrim is for the most part. And for a Bethesda title, especially with Starfield being in the conversation again this week, again with the rumor that ID Soft, and this is coming directly from Idle Sloth. Rumor ID Software working closely with Bethesda to overhaul Starfield combat since last August. That's August 2022. The combat is vastly better state than it was during the Xbox showcase, and this is supposed to be a major grain of salt. Again, when you have things like that put out there like that, you have me that's jumping into Skyrim just trying to give it a shot. And again, I paid $30 for this game to get the anniversary edition and everything. I wanted to get all the content so I could play it in its best light and do everything. Yeah. And again, I do still find myself sitting here saying that, hey, maybe I should keep, like, I've downloaded and uninstalled this game 5 times. I'm talking about the 500 plus mods every time. Yeah. Uninstall and reinstall. Of course, it's the one click. I'm not doing it like,
right.
You know, picking and choosing, but it still takes time, right? It takes about 30 minutes to an hour to get everything back up and running. And I've done this 5 times in a row. I'll say the first 2 times I was having issues with the mods and shit, giving me issues. I was also trying to play the game a certain way because I'll be honest and say that, like, Souls titles have kind of ruined me in that. In third-person gameplay, I expect to be able to approach, you know, combat situations a certain way, back up from the enemy, you know, where if my back facing, you know, walking backwards like this, shimmying a little bit, you know, timing the attacks and, you know, moving around, using the space that I'm in to line that up. And in this, it's like, nah, if you don't have a fucking shield, you're probably gonna get wrecked.
Oh yeah.
You're probably gonna get fucking, you're gonna get wrecked. And again, it's just, there's a lot into it. And it's still, even now, I'm sitting here thinking, like, maybe I should try it again. Maybe I should download everything. Maybe I should just keep playing. And that enough tells me that the power of what the world building does and what good character development can do for a game.
Yeah.
Because that's it's right there. I wouldn't have done it 5 times if that wasn't the case. Every time I put it down because of the combat, it's like, I can't do this. And then I go somewhere, I'm picking up the daughter from school or whatever, and I'm thinking about it like, I don't know, maybe it was just a mod that I just wasn't working right, and maybe I'll just adjust some things, and I'll jump back in. Then boom, I'm back in it for 2 or 3 hours, just lost in the world. That if I fucking just, I'm supposed to be doing this mission, there's some people over here I can fight. Now I'm trying to mess with the combat mechanics again, and it's showing me that it's like, hey, this game is kind of dated, man. Even with these mods, it's not where you would like it. So, hey, just uninstall it, step away. There's other games, especially with the time investment, because it's not like it's a small game either. I can easily see how this is a 100-hour experience, and that's not even you touching the surface. Especially with all the additional content that they have in that game now, with how expansive that world is. I think that's what makes Zelda such an approachable game, because at the end of the day, it's not a yes, Zelda doesn't hold your hand the same way Skyrim doesn't necessarily hold your hand. Like, yeah, you have a mission, but there's also not so much vastness. Like, you know, at a point in Zelda, it doesn't take long for you to understand, this is this shop, this is this. Or if I need to go get some more food, I got to get these foods. I can kind of eat these. They give me back my hearts. In Skyrim, it's like, yeah, you got these foods, but you're probably going to need to cook them so you can get more health. Or you're going to need more money so you can get some more items, so that you can make sure that you have these things in your inventory, so that when you do go to cook, you have the ingredients you need. There's some of that in Zelda, but it's not as tedious. So I can understand why, like, people are using Zelda as that, this is life-changing and I've never experienced a game like this. No, you have. It just was too much for you. And Zelda puts it in a way, and again, this speaks to game design and you as a game director knowing how to accomplish your goal. And also speaks to how different devs approach a game or that similar game style and how it works for different people. The Skyrim is an everlasting game.
Just different visions, yeah.
For an example, right?
Yeah.
Zelda is kind of like, after a couple years, you've kind of seen it all, done it all, right? Yeah, you might have some people that go hard, they're doing some trick shots, blowing themselves up and shooting each other across the map and stuff like that. But Skyrim is just like, 10 years later from Skyrim, people are showing you stuff that you probably haven't seen before. You're like, damn, I played that shit for 500 hours.
Nope.
You said in 1,000 hours, in your other 500 hours, you saw these things? Damn, maybe I should jump back in. Right. It does that for people. Again, mixing a couple different topics in there, but I wanted to bring it to the table because I do feel like it does touch on a bit of everything, and they all have something to do with each other, because people are out here now, again, with Zelda, saying that, hey, this is the greatest game ever made. Regardless of visuals, regardless of anything else, the gameplay itself, these open world survivor mechanics, it makes me want to explore. I mean, there are other games that have done that.
There's a lot of games
and do it well. But I can't knock that on Zelda because it does. And again, I'm playing through Breath of the Wild currently also. I see it. It does make it more palatable. Makes it like, oh yeah, you feel like you're moving. Where in a game like Skyrim, it's like, it's minimal progression. Yeah, you do a mission, it's like, this is probably one mission out of a million. Fuck. What else can I do? Then you see these mission boards. They got like 100 missions there, and you're like, bro, there's so much to do in this goddamn game. So it's just one of those things, and with so many different games, especially releasing around each other, in that conversation, the game of the year being on the forefront also.
Yep.
Again, I wanted to bring Skyrim to the forefront because this is my first time ever playing it, really giving it a shot. Previous times I got through that intro section or whatever, with the dragon, and then that was it. I never played further than that, really. So this is like my first time giving it a shot, and I put about 15 hours into the game. Like, that's me playing the game, not just, booting it up, shutting it down, tweaking. No, that's me playing it. And you bringing my information and my experience to the table and saying, hey, from the news that we've gotten from Starfield this week, this is kind of what I'm now expecting. This is how it's kind of changed how I'm looking at Starfield, maybe a little bit. This is what I want to see from Starfield. And then also how, because again, apparently Zelda demonstrates why Starfield will never be in the game of the year conversation. I saw that too this week, so I wanted to get another aspect of why and how some people may say these things, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I'm coming from. Again, I wanted to see if I was tripping about Skyrim. Sorry that it kind of got convoluted with other topics too, but I did feel like the different things did touch on each other as we moved through the conversation. So my fault. But any particulars that you'd like to pull out of that, Paul?
No,
out of the Starfield and
Zelda it's part of the conversation. This is what we do here, right? So we take it in different directions, and you don't get this kind of conversation everywhere else. And it's about perspective, and that's why I think it is interesting and fascinating when you bring this up, because you come from a totally different place to a lot of people. I think that Zelda. Listen, Zelda is a much more controlled experience, like you said. Yes, it has the open world. Yes, it has the exploration. Again, I will never know because I will never touch it. I just have zero interest. The characters don't interest me. The story doesn't interest me. Nothing about that game interests me whatsoever. And I can find it, like you said, Steele. I can find the exploration. I can find the open world. I can find the survival. I can find the crafting in hundreds of other games now. Like, there's just, like, that's just me. And so I come from that perspective. But for people, for certain individuals, and there are going to be certain individuals who like your Elder Scrolls, who like your Fallouts, and also like Zelda, of course. But it is a much more controlled experience from the aspect, like you said, Steele. It is a smaller overall experience, even though I've heard that Tears of the Kingdom is much bigger because they have an underworld now. On top of the
like
Sky
Elden
World and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, like Elder Scrolls.
Oh,
right?
what? Elden Ring.
Like
Elder
Scrolls
there's an underground level. And
there's underground too.
There's
In Elden Ring, and there's underground in Elder Scrolls as well. There's huge, massive complexes under the ground. Right?
No, Zelda's the only game that's ever done that.
But like you're saying, for the people who can get overwhelmed when they look at something like Elder Scrolls, listen, that's the whole magic part about Bethesda games. For me personally, the experience is what you want it to be. It is how you want to play the game. You can play the game. You don't have to touch the main line forever if you don't want to. You don't have to. You can sit and just travel and hunt down dragons if you want to all damn day. Like, that's like the part of the experience. And Zelda gives that to you, just in smaller portions. Like you said, from everything I've read, it doesn't handheld. It kind of gives you a general sense of direction,
Mm-hmm.
but then lets you go decide how you're going to complete that mission or get over to that point in the world. That's very similar to Skyrim. That's very similar to Fallout. Like, hey, we're giving you this whole open world. This is what a sandbox is. You go do what you want to do to get to that next point. But Zelda does have a very strong narrative attached to it, with a very strong sense of like, hey, I need or I want to progress this at a certain point. Where Elder Scrolls, Fallouts, Bethesda titles, they give you that. They give you that, but you don't, like, you can play for 100 hours and never feel like you need to go touch any mainline mission. Like, I'm just enjoying myself out here in the open world. I found 500 other side missions that I'm gonna go do. Like, it's up to you more so in that way.
Let me give this to you, Paul. Yeah. I think Skyrim is more enjoyable to play than Witcher 3 is.
Right.
In third person.
Right.
I mean, maybe that's a hot take, but I mean, again,
it's different experience.
I have literally had more enjoyment from playing Skyrim with mods, of course, than I ever did with Witcher 3. Mm-hmm. And I played Witcher 3 collectively. I started it over 3 or 4 times, and I have about almost 10 hours in the game overall.
And I got more time in Witcher 3, and I still can't. It still doesn't click the way that I want to click.
So
like I said, this last time it did click more, but no, it's a totally different experience, and I get what you're saying, Steele.
So it's like there's something there where it's just like, it's just not story. It's just not this. So it's just not that. And I think that's what adds so much vastness to this conversation, right? Yeah. What makes it so interesting and why I wanted to talk about it. It's like, because everybody feels differently about this, and like how they view it is different, and what makes it enjoyable is different. But then also talking through it and just kind of like understanding what made points hit for you as a gamer, and what works for some games and what doesn't work in other games, and how that there's still that gray area that we always talk about that people don't ever want to acknowledge.
Well, acknowledge, or it's just really tough to talk about because you can't put your finger on a certain aspect. I don't know why, Steele. Again, if you ran down what The Witcher offers, I would say that's a game that is going to be an absolute GOAT for me, right? If you just ran it down from the basics without handing me the controller, without anything, I would say, damn, that's got the potential to be a GOAT for me, right? But when I hop into the game, and like I said, the last experience with the quality of life stuff that they did with the current gen, it made a difference. But it still did not pull me in. But then you have the same dev, and why I'm piggybacking off of you with The Witcher 3, because it's a good point. But you've got the same dev who goes and does a game like Cyberpunk 2077.
Oh, Cyberpunk is a great game.
That's
a fucking great game.
Right, but that's the difference, right, Steele? Cyberpunk fell more in line with Bethesda's sandbox than The Witcher 3 obviously does, because The Witcher 3 wasn't trying to be that game, but it fell more in line because I found myself just driving around, Steele, in Cyberpunk, taking in the scenery, just hanging out, taking pictures, doing side missions.
Had a good narrative too.
It had a great narrative, but just experiencing the world like I do when I play a Bethesda title.
Right.
And guess what? Cyberpunk 2077 is a GOAT for me, right? It's a top 10 all time.
Me too.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, it's crazy.
Really good game.
But that's the difference, right? That's the difference experiences. But then I can also say, right, Mass Effect, which was more Witcher 3-like than it was Bethesda-like.
Yeah.
It was a more controlled narrative.
Mass Effect is 10 times better than Witcher 3 will ever be.
Don't get me wrong. I'm not sitting here talking about that Witcher 3 is an open world. It is open world. You can go anywhere and you can do whatever the hell you please. But it's not sandboxy to me on the level of Bethesda. But what I'm saying is, it's not like I have it's not like I don't like that style of game, because I can go play a Mass Effect and say Mass Effect is a GOAT all time for me as well. And it's a much more controlled, narrative driven game that brings you from point A to point B. Yes, there's certain areas where you can go to explore and do that kind of stuff, but it's much more focused than an open world Bethesda RPG is. And I loved it. I absolutely loved the entire trilogy, right? So it's just that gray area that we talk about, Steele, is that part that makes the experience unique for every gamer, and why we continuously say there's no one game that every single gamer plays. So when people come at us and say, oh, if you don't like Spider-Man, if you don't like God of War, if you don't like that Sony type of game, you're not a real gamer. Well, or you're not this, you're not that.
And it's obvious when you have at least a 90 million hardcore base.
Right.
Out of 140, 50 million consoles. And even now, when the sales aren't matching what Nintendo does, right? That's like Nintendo games are the only ones where maybe you have a lot of people that are very familiar. Eastside Vandal, he asked, Steel, have you played Dragon Age Origins? No, I have never played Dragon Age Origins.
Yeah.
I haven't played any of the Dragon Age games. Right. I was interested in trying Inquisition.
Yeah,
and I never played it. That was like the last one that I was like, man, maybe I should try this game out, and I never played it. So no, I mean, again, if you're making a recommendation, definitely make a recommendation, because again, I like those style of games, but I also know what I like as a gamer, and because of time, more so than anything else, it takes a lot, especially in today's era. With how games have kind of moved forward and whatnot, different aspects to games. It takes a lot for a game to pull my attention and for me to put it in my main rotation, right? Because as good as I think Skyrim is, I can be honest and say I'm not willing to put more time in to get used to playing the game. I can see how it would be enjoyable. And again, I wouldn't have reinstalled it and went back to it as many times as I have. And I think that speaks leagues and bounds, or me still even thinking about it now speaks leaps and bounds more than anything else does. Again, I think me stating that I had more of an enjoyment out of Skyrim than me playing Witcher 3 speaks leaps and bounds for me. But it may not for other people. Some people probably not going to get that, and that's fine. But a lot of it is a time thing, and I am willing to make certain sacrifices if that's the case, and I'll just miss out on an experience. But I'm not going to just sit here and say all of a sudden the game is trash, or that without these mods the game is garbage, and I don't see how anybody could have played this. No, I get it. So, but it's just one of those things. You're muted, Paul.
God damn, I swear to Christ, sometimes I just do it unconsciously. No, I think it's an interesting discussion for sure, Steel. And I think Starfield is going to be however it comes out. It doesn't matter whether it shows up and it hits mid 90s to high 90s. It doesn't matter if it shows up and it's high 70s, low 80s.
Yeah.
There's going to be a bigger discussion here about what it means, because there are still going to be people like me that I could see myself if this shows up and it's high 70s because the critics nitpick it apart and they find all these things wrong with it. I'm still going to go in this game and probably love the hell out of it. Right.
I mean, again,
it's going to be my Bethesda game.
It was the same thing with Cyberpunk. Right, everybody said they literally hated the game, and we were sitting here a week after we beat it, like, damn, this is a great fucking game.
Oh yeah, no, I still think about Cyberpunk. I still think about Cyberpunk to this day. Yeah. I do. There are times. Bring back Jackie. Listen, it's going to be a point of contention no matter what with Starfield, because you're going to have this nitpicking, you're going to have the microscope on it. It is a extremely important release for Xbox, and an extremely important release for Bethesda and for Todd, coming off of, again, people forget because, again, we mix up Fallout 76, but to the masses, Fallout 76 will be associated with Bethesda forever. And because of that, there are people questioning whether or not Bethesda still has the magic, and whether or not Bethesda has a place in 2023 gaming. Do. So do I. Oh, obviously, beyond.
There is literally no other game that approaches world building the way that Bethesda does.
Right. And I agree with that. But as we see, Steel, as we see, Steel, with Breath of the Wild, which came out after, and with, again, games. People forget that Bethesda 2 times have had one of their games launch when a Zelda game has launched and has beat it for Game of the Year. So it has happened, folks, where Bethesda has overcome the Zelda love and wound up beating it.
Yeah.
Now, one of them was Skyward Sword, right? Obviously, but that scored 95. People look back at that game now and say, it probably wasn't as good as we all thought it was. But at the time, it still was a Zelda Game of the Year quality release for the majority, for the critics. They gave it a 95. And Skyrim came along and beat it, right? Or was it Fallout 4? One of the two. I can't remember which one it was. I always forget. But anyways, the point being is that Bethesda here has a lot riding on this. Xbox has a lot riding on Starfield. The fact that we now have word that other teams have come in and helped, and I will say behind the scenes, Idlesoft put this out there because it came from 4chan, said take it with a grain of salt. I will say behind the scenes, we got some smoke confirmation that this is probably more than true. That they have had multiple teams come in and work on Starfield, not like just like, hey, we're just gonna kind of advise you, like that. We kind of heard it did with Arcane and with Redfall, but there have been teams in there from a while ago working on Starfield.
Another thing too, Pong,
to work on things. So we're gonna see.
Another thing too, Pong. I don't mean to interrupt, but
no,
is that ID has been done with Doom for a while.
Yes, and they
literally said that this final Doom DLC was it for them for Doom 4. For the foreseeable future. And they do have a big team. And they're not currently doing anything that we know of.
Right.
The other thing too is because I've seen people talk about ID like it's Xbox sending ID over, and ID is part of ZeniMax, which is directly neighbored to, but like they're literally in house. So it's like this isn't Xbox had to make a call or Microsoft had to make a call. No, they were probably already like Todd probably stepped into and see what they were doing. Said, hey, you guys are done with Doom. You got Starfield over here. How about you guys come see come work with us? You guys ain't got much else going on currently. We bring some guys over. You guys, put your talents in this so we can make this game really unique. And maybe they saw a breakthrough in some gameplay mechanic in August, which is why it got delayed. And they wanted to implement it. It was like, okay, yeah, let's get this done. Let's get it refined. Again, got to go off of rumors, but when you have so many talented devs, and I know they said the same thing with Redfall, but ID came in with Redfall, and I can see how they probably had some hands in that. But I do think in Starfield, again, I don't think it's just because people are like, oh, well, it has to be make a break for Xbox. Honestly, I think Starfield was a make or break for Bethesda overall. I don't think that they would have delayed it past last year if it were them by themselves. So that would have probably added on to their Bethesda kind of conversation. There would have been some things to work through. But I do think because of Xbox and because they were able to get the delay in there, this will definitely be I'm not expecting for it to be perfect in the way that people downplay them. Oh, you expect the game to be perfect? You're going to have bugs. And it's like, okay, but you say bugs like they're going to be like your typical bugs that you expect in other games. Like, no, like an NPC running into a wall, that happens, man. Like, especially in a game that's using so much goddamn code with everything in the scope of it. To be as massive as it is, and people say, "Oh, that's an excuse. You can't use scope as an excuse for what the game to have bugs." It's like, okay, but you guys are the same ones. I want to say that people don't understand game design. Right. Oh, okay, but you the same one that don't understand. Oh, well, you should be able to do 60 frames. Mm-hmm. You don't understand why we can't get 60 frames. Right. It's. There's a lot there is a lot that's riding on this, and I do think they're putting their best foot forward. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. Wow, that was a hell of a intro there, Steele.
Yeah, man, we were getting the conversation again. That's why I was also trying to tie in some of those other things, or I didn't accidentally tied in some of the other things, but because they did play into the conversation, which is why I wanted to get your opinion on like the whole Zelda situation, how people that. And then also with this rumor about Starfield having maybe some enhanced combat mechanics. Because again, I mean, I know traditionally, that might have not been the focus for most people for Bethesda games, but it'll be kind of.
It's different now.
I think things are different now, and Todd understands that things are different now. Yeah. And you do have to, if you've been able to collectively hit your world building and your character development in every game that you put out, and the weakest part of your game is combat, it only makes sense in your brand new IP. Then this is where you blend everything together finally, right? Where it's just like, this is the game where people are going to say, damn, well, Bethesda has a little bit of fucking everything. Got the combat's good. The third person combat feels good. First person combat feels great. The exploration is bar none. Character development is some of the greatest since Mass Effect. And, you know, there's these different conversations going on. That's what I am anticipating, and maybe that's too much hype on the game itself, but I'm only basing that off of the only other area that I can really see them grow at, right? And that is in the combat side of things. So that's why I'm kind of saying, I kind of do feel like there is more than just a rumor to this. Again, especially with ID being in-house, their neighbors, they're right there working next to side by side to each other. I think there's definitely a lot more truth.
Yep.
Most may get.
100%, and we're months away from finding out. June 11th is going to tell us a lot too.
Yeah, no, it is.
We need to get our hands on it, but we're going to see a lot more on June 11th than we have, and hear a lot more, and that's going to really give us a good look at the direction where they're going. Like you said, Steele, it's a valid conversation to have in 2023. Again, it's not the old days. Some of us live in that nostalgia. Some of us still, again, I don't have a problem going back and playing old games, whatsoever. I take them for what there is. But again, in 2023, when you're putting out a brand new IP for the first time in over 20 years, and you are considered one of the best world building developers out there, if not the best, you have a very unique approach to the sandbox. How are you going to elevate that in 2023? And like you said, shoring up some of the weaknesses. Again, they don't have to become strengths overnight.
Yeah, no, they don't have to.
But the allowances given to you, 10, 15, 20 years ago in games when you were pushing the envelope, you got to kind of shore those up and make them good, and then take everything else you were trying to do and push the envelope again in all your strengths. And I think that's what's going to be interesting to see if Bethesda can do that now.
Yeah, because the other thing to consider too, Paul, is this game isn't going to have magic in it. This game isn't going to have all these other healing and fire and lightning and like you could do in Skyrim or traditionally in other games, or even Fallout, where you have the other vast system, which is why, again, I'm iterating the whole combat side of it, because I mean, yeah, you could say Fallout's more focused on exploring and character development or whatever, but at the same point, like, still gotta shoot shit. You still gotta. You can't avoid it.
And you're gonna do this and this for sure. Yeah, bringing back some of the older school RPG elements, which is what a lot of people thought were missing from Fallout 4. So, it's gonna be really interesting.
Well, With that, I think this is gonna be a perfect opportunity for us to get into our upcoming games.
It is.
Let's see what we got releasing here.
This is so fun.
Got some things for people excited. I will say, as I'm getting this set up, the only other game that I was playing is the game that you see right here on screen, and that is Punishing Gray Raven. I did want to talk about a little bit about that. I got carried away with talking about Starfield and Zelda and
Skyrim.
And Skyrim. Having just a conducive conversation. I thought we were having a great combo. But Punishing Gray Raven is a game that is currently only available on mobile. I got accepted into the early access for PC. So that's where I've been playing it at. And the combat in this game is bar none. It reminds me a lot of Scarlet Nexus, without the without the missions being as long. Right? That's the only thing that Punishing Gray Raven is missing, because it does have those gotcha mechanics, because it did start off as a mobile game, more so. I guess it's supposed to be played in certain spurts, whatever the case. That's how they have it set up. Now, since it released, they have added other gameplay mechanics to it. So there are other modes that you can dive in and really have some time in. No, Punishing Gray Raven is not made by the same devs that made Genshin Impact. Matter of fact, the developer and the publisher, the developer is Guangzhou Kuro, also Kuro Technology, and then the publisher is also Kuro. So Kuro Games, and it's made in the Unity engine. These are the same people who are making Wuthering Waves, which is another gacha type game. A lot of people are comparing it to Genshin Impact. But Wuthering Waves has the biggest difference between Genshin and a game like this, for an example, or Wuthering Waves that's coming to release, that's currently in closed beta, is the combat. These games have much more involved combat, more akin to like a Devil May Cry. Versus, I still think it's not gonna say dumbed down, but it's more refined and even more easier to understand. Like, for an example, in Punishing Gray Raven, the combat mechanics, how they essentially work, like you have your basic attacks and you have your special abilities, but you also have other abilities that you can trigger through a mechanic. The best way that I can compare it to is like Bejeweled, where if you match certain, like let's say you have red elements, you have yellow elements, you have blue elements. Now, don't think that's fire, lightning, and earth. And don't think of it that way. I'm only using the elements because it's the best way to break it down. But what happens is that the different elements will come up on your timeline. You might be able to see a little bit in my gameplay here. But let's say you get a red, yellow, and blue ability, right? What you want is to get 3 of the same color abilities together, and it allows you to do your other special ability. And each color has its own special ability, but you have to match, like, of course you could do the ability on its own, right? But when you match 3 of them together, kind of like you do in Bejeweled or at Tetris, for an example, it clears the line, condenses the line, and then also that ability ends up doing more damage. So you're constantly in this dance, the best way that I can compare it, to where you're keeping up with, because the other thing too is that the combat has a dodge mechanic, which is why I compared it to Scarlet Nexus, where it slows down time. Now, you can't do this repetitively, and also the dodge mechanic does have a limit to them. So it forces you, well, it wants you to swap characters because each character has a reset dodge cooldown, and the characters all have different abilities. So it's like you're doing this whole team play mechanic, kind of like how you would see in typical JRPGs, where like a Tale series, or like in Scarlet Nexus, where you're using your team, you're doing the different abilities. Very similar to that, but it's also taking like basic games like a Bejeweled and adding the those combo multipliers and adding the effects and the extra bonus damage and making that power creep or the abilities feel very unique. It's a game that I'm hoping does come to console at some point soon. These are some more of the games that I do think that we need to get on console because they would do extremely well on console. I'm not just talking about like Genshin only being restricted to PlayStation 4. I'm talking about you need to be putting these games everywhere. Just because it's it's a mobile game, and yo, there are so many console players who would love to play this style of game just because of the combat mechanics by themselves. And I'll be honest, like the combat mechanics was the first thing that, like, of course, carries me in this game, but the story really feels something akin to a Nier Automata or Nier Replicant, or that IP overall, because you do have that aspect of, hey, something came down, humanity's messed up, we had to leave Earth, androids were created, and now you, the commandant, are the human controlling your android team. And then they use waifus and husbandos, or whatever they call them. They use these cute looking characters or whatever as part of the gotcha mechanic to get you pulled. Now, that doesn't work on me. I do like good looking characters. I wish it was more customizable. That's the only negative for me, like colors and things of that nature. But for a gotcha game, this is definitely one that has pulled my attention in all the right ways. And again, I'm in the early access for the PC client. I was one of 6,000 to get accepted. So
interesting.
That's what I've been doing with.
Sounds pretty cool. I like it.
It is really dope, especially for an anime-esque game. I think a lot of people would really like playing. I hope that it ends up coming to more platforms. Let's see how well it does on PC. From what I've seen in the Reddits and the YouTube comments and whatnot, it's one of the main things that a lot of people stopped playing the game on mobile because it was just like, man, maybe they didn't have the greatest phone, or because it can be a demanding game. You got different options or whatever, but because it is, bro, I played this game through a PC client, through the mobile, like an emulator basically for mobile on PC. And yes, I was getting better performance, but it's nothing in comparison to the straight up PC client for the game. It feels completely different. So yeah, there's that. That's what I've been into this week. Hopefully you guys enjoy the gameplay. If you do, let me know in the comments below. And for those listening on the audio side of things, come check us out on YouTube, man. Punishing Gray Raven, or check PGR out on YouTube. See if it's something for you. And again, I know some people are like, oh, loot boxes and gotcha mechanics and rolling for characters. And look, this is probably one of the best ways to fight your FOMO. That's something that me and Pong have been talking about here on multiple occasions. You want to really put your metal to the test and fight FOMO. Put yourself in a gotcha game and see how well you can do with fighting FOMO. Because they definitely play true.
Train that willpower.
Yeah,
let's go.
Exactly, and we should as gamers. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's get into these upcoming games.
Sir, yes, sir. I'm ready to rock and roll. Let me know when you are. Steel, you ready? Short list this week.
Short list. Yeah. Let's get it rock and roll.
All right. So we are coming up on week of the 15th of May. And we're going to start out with one that I wish was coming to Xbox, but it's not. This is a game that we saw late last year, I think. Maybe early this year. God, time flies. Anyways, Humanity. Nice little indie title.
Okay, yeah, we saw that this year at the VR.
Was it this year? Mm-hmm. Okay. Where you're a little spirit dog, and you are leading large groups of humans in lemmings-like fashion through puzzle levels. That also, yes, it looks very interesting. And you have to kind of lead these large groups of people through these puzzles. Without losing too many of them. You wind up also meeting enemies, of course, and there are obviously traps that you have to avoid. And this was the one for if you're trying to trigger your memory. If you did see it, this is the one where all of a sudden it was like, oh, this is a cool little puzzle game, blah, blah, blah. You know, I kind of get the concept, lemmings, blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden you started meeting shadow people that were enemies that could change, your other people if they touched.
Right.
Into shadow people. And then we got to see that all of a sudden it was Jedi on Sith battle out of the blue, where your human beings all of a sudden had, blue lightsaber like devices, and the shadow people had red lightsaber like devices, and all of a sudden there was mass battles going on. It was like went from this cute little puzzle game to whoa. We've got freaking Braveheart going on here. What the hell is happening? Like, this is crazy. But it's coming to PlayStation 5. PlayStation VR 2, PlayStation 4, VR 1, and PC. Developed by the LTD, published by Enhanced Games. That's dropping May the 16th. So go check that out if you guys have the opportunity to play on one of those. I would recommend looking at this game because I wish it was coming to Xbox. And then we got one. It's got to come to console eventually, Steel. Right now it's going to be PC only. May 17th. It's got to come to console. This game is made for console when it comes to multiplayer aspects, but a beloved IP. And again, this IP is underutilized in my opinion. Yes, there are some PC games out there. I'd love to see some stuff come to console eventually, but Starship Troopers Extermination, love Starship Troopers, one of the best. I mean, again, campy sci-fi flicks that turns out Starship to be Troopers, absolutely beloved. Bro, it's so good. I love Starship Troopers. It's beyond good. Do you want to know more? Absolutely love Starship Troopers. And this Extermination looks fun as hell. I mean, again, it is what it is. It's not trying to be anything more than it is. First person shooter where you're killing bugs. So give it to me. nonstop, PC, developed by Offworld Industries, published by Sony Pictures.
It's a 12-player co-op game.
12-player co-op. Yep.
Crazy.
Give me tactical nukes. Let's go get some bugs, man. I'm all
it's so good. It's so great.
It's so bad. It's so good.
It's great. It's great.
Firmament is coming to PC and Mac. This will be coming to PlayStation 5, VR2, and PlayStation 4 at a later date.
Whoa!
It says to be announced. This is an adventure puzzle game. So
you say you're firm?
Firmament.
Whoa! Okay.
Yeah, not what you think.
Okay, my fault.
I said developed by Cayenne, incorporated, published by Cayenne. Yes, Cyan for some people. If that's how you like to pronounce it. I pronounce it Cayenne. And then we got the Outlast Trials coming to PC. Yes, a lot of people are into Outlast. Me, again, we don't do dark horror things. So Outlast was never one of my things. I tried. Actually, one of the Outlasts had to have the sound completely off. Literally, I had the sound completely off, so all I could see was the screen because I couldn't deal with the sound effects in it. This is coming to PC. This is up to 4 players, so seems like a little. I don't know if it's co-op. I think it's got to be co-op, right, Steel? Developed by Red Barrels, published by Red Barrels. In the Outlast Trials, coming to PC.
It says 1 to 4 players. I'd imagine it is. I'm not playing that shit. Nope. Anything that has the name Outlast. Is it Outlast or Outcast? Whatever the game, scary game. Is it Outlast? Yeah, I'm not. Yeah. I'm cool. I'm not playing that.
And then Steel, one that you were interested in. This is going to wind up in the week. I'm not. It looks fun and it looks cool, but Lego 2K Drive coming to PlayStation 5, Xbox Series, PlayStation 4, Xbox One, Switch, PC. Basically. Lego Horizon is what this is, except you got boats, planes. You can transform on the go. You can build, vehicles. Exactly what you expect out of Lego. I know, Steel, you thought you were gonna maybe hop into this. What do you think?
I don't know if I'm gonna end up purchasing the game. I don't know yet. I have seen some gameplay and it does look good. Again, for a Mario Kart-esque game. The biggest reason that I was interested in it is because the Lego racing game on Nintendo 64 was one of my most favorite racing games of all time. I like that game way better than I ever liked Mario Kart. To be quite honest, the way that they balance the vehicles and allowing you to kind of create your own vehicles and the way they made you chase, that loot grind to kind of get the bricks and to get better vehicles, to get better drivers and things of that nature. That's what got me extremely interested in before. There does seem to be a lot of that in here, but I don't know if I'm going to necessarily consider it. Again, got some other things going on personally in the background, so it's just like I'm not just trying to throw my money at everything. And with the kind of games that I'm playing currently too, like I gotta be realistic with my.
Nope, get it. But no, it does look good. So anybody looking for that Mario Kart-esque type racer with Legos, and again, you can transform on the fly. It's pretty cool.
I feel like this is missing an opportunity to be on Game Pass.
Yeah, it is. But you know how that goes sometimes. That's it for this week. That's this upcoming game of weeks. Again, short list, but who doesn't have a billion things to play right now? we can use some weeks like this where we don't have much going on. I can tell you that much because we've got so much. That's it, Stu. So we can hop into the topics now.
Nice. Okay. Well, we did talk about Zelda a little bit earlier. It was part of our conversation earlier. Was there any additional things that you wanted to add on as far as like Tears of the Kingdom goes? There is the bias there. There are games that will get the pass. I didn't mention this. I did beat Jedi Survivor.
Oh, you did?
Yes.
Sir.
It is a fantastic game. Leagues better than the first game ever was.
Okay.
I'll be honest and say that. It's also going to be it's going to be a fun game. I think you'll have some good fun with it, Pong. Whenever you end up jumping into it. Yeah. Again, from start to finish, I will still say that I wasn't expecting some of the things to happen the way they do. So that is still special. The game isn't necessarily like a top 10 or anything like that for me currently. But I will say it does definitely rival the Unleashed games for me. Now, of course, the Unleashed games had a little more simplified combat. We're over exaggerated a lot of the force abilities and whatnot. So of course you're not going to get that here, but as far as overall character development, story building, and whatnot, they did really well with this one, and I enjoyed every moment. The set pieces was great. Shout out to Respawn. They know what they're doing with Star Wars. That's what I'll say for sure. Especially, hey guys, like Respawn, you may not ever listen to this, but Vince, if y'all do, keep moving in the direction that y'all are moving. If this is the growth that y'all are expecting to see, moving into your next iterations of games, you need to keep that your foot on the neck, because y'all are on the pulse. And whenever you make the third game, I will say there will be a third game.
Yeah.
Definitely make sure that you lean into that gray side. I don't care what side that you end up picking. Whether you do pick, maybe they go bold and say, no, he's a gray Jedi. I don't think that's gonna happen, but that's my wish and that is my ambition. If they're able to master that, make it appealing, and get people to understand what a great Jedi truly is. Al, I will say, does have some of the early showings of someone who could.
That's part of all Jedi, though, right? So
but this one, I think, is the best representation for that.
Well, I don't know, but I'm just saying that the path to a Jedi
is dealing with like
it deals with the gray stuff. Like, again, that's why the gray Jedi were never really brought up, because people hate that neutral ride the fence stuff in a lot of ways. They want their characters to be either good or evil.
Right.
In a lot of,
I don't think Cal has to be.
No, and I agree. I wish they would certainly do it, but that is the path of the Jedi, is to walk both sides and then eventually wind up as the Jedi, right? And that's why a lot of people, when you go back and look at the Jedi, you see that gray area, because the Jedi aren't necessarily always the good guys.
Yeah,
like, how they deal with things. So, anyways, that's a whole Star Wars philosophy discussion. And lore discussion, because it's interesting, to say the least.
What makes that IP so great, man?
Yeah. But no, in Vince we trust. Again, if Vince and Respawn can pull off, I mean, they've already pulled off Titanfall, despite the fact that it didn't sell well. That was EA's problem, not Vince's problem.
Yeah, Titanfall not continuing. That's EA.
Titanfall is one of the greatest.
Same thing with Anthem. It's EA.
One of the greatest multiplayer games ever. It's one of the greatest mech games of all time. The single-player campaign in Titanfall 2 is absolutely the chef's kiss. It's one of the greatest first-person campaigns of all time, based on a multiplayer game. And then he turns around, makes Apex, absolutely dominates in that area. Now you've got him dominating in a single-player, narrative-driven Star Wars action game. He is now handling. They are making a first-person Star Wars game as well, which we know is going to be coming out. They have partnered with Qubits, I think it is. I always forget. Or BitPixel, for a RTS Star Wars game. And he has now taken over the entire Battlefield franchise. If he pulls off all of that, Steel, and the quality remains at this level for Respawn, Zampella is going to be one of those singular developers, singular directors, like a Todd Howard, like a Kojima, where his name is known, which doesn't happen in this industry very often. It already is to us, but Zampella will be on a different pedestal, because you're talking about multiple different types of genres and dominating. That means his leadership capabilities, because it's not him making the games. It's him directing his teams. He is on another level when it comes to leadership to pull all of that off, for sure. Absolutely incredible job to hear you say that that's what you wound up with, finishing Jedi Survivor. It absolutely being leaps and bounds ahead of Fallen Order. That says a lot, Steel, coming from you, because I know you and I felt similar when it came to Fallen Order.
Yeah, no, Fallen Order, it was solid, but it was weak. Right. Very, very weak in many ways. If it wasn't for the combat, I don't think I would have been able to progress as far as I would have. But as far as like everything, the culmination of the game, of an IP, Jedi Survivor is leagues. That is, again, a perfect example of, your second iteration of a game, knocking it out of the park. But the reason I brought that up mainly is because Jedi Survivor did have its issues up front. And even I have my issues, although I'll still give it a 9 out of 10, with me not being able to give it a 10 out of 10 because of the frame issues that I dealt with. And that was the main thing that I dealt with. But I also will be honest and say, I do have a computer that can brute force its way through a lot of that too. So there is that aspect.
The Tears of the Kingdom is what we originally started on. And
yes.
Tears of the Kingdom. I again, since I'm not playing, since I don't have an interest, I'll keep my thoughts limited. As far as the performance stuff goes, again, respect Nintendo's hustle, and I say this half jokingly but half truth. They themselves, by releasing hardware in 2017 that was already outdated in 2017, lowered the bars of expectations.
Yeah.
It is genius on a certain level, and this is the reason why Nintendo got out of competing with Sony and Xbox in the premium or the high performance console that's now been created. High performance console market, we'll just call it that. They purposefully remove themselves from all those discussions by putting out this type of hardware. There is no expectations. Again, the conversation out here, the only thing I will say that is valid when you talk about the 30 frames, the performance problems that the Tears of the Kingdom. Now, again, I watched the Digital Foundry. I watched their whole video on it. Did a great job with it. Again, the patch supposedly fixed a lot of the early stuff that we were hearing about it. It does run at pretty consistent 30 frames. There are still areas where it will dip. But the fact is, the only thing I can say is for the people out here, and there is a group of them who were complaining about 30 frames, whether it's on PlayStation, whether it's on Xbox, and of course, the Redfall, talk, all that kind of stuff, brought it back into light. For those of you that do sit out here and complain about 30 frames on other consoles and then turn around and play your Switch and Tears of the Kingdom or whatever game at 30 frames, listen, that's kind of stupid. Okay, that means you don't have a problem with 30 frames depending on the game. So just come out and say it's game dependent upon when you are willing to play 30 frames. All right, just come out and say that way. Don't shred games at 30 frames and then turn around and play another game at 30 frames and say everything's good. But expectations wise, for the hardware, for the Switch, of course, Nintendo, again, set the bar so low back in 2017 when they launched this hardware that none of us ever expected Tears of the Kingdom to be 60 frames, nor should we have.
Mm-hmm.
They were never going to get this game to run at 60 frames. What they did with it, how they get the open world from everything I've seen with all the actual, with all the physical, what am I looking for? Steel, with all the different engines in play.
The physics. Yeah,
the physics systems in play is impressive.
It's extremely impressive.
And again, this goes back to Nintendo's strengths, right? This goes back to Nintendo's strengths. They take 6 years. They polish the hell out of their game. They make sure that the game is performing on all levels before they launch it. Yes, again, there are dips. But again, with everything involved, I'm shocked there's not more. I'm shocked that there's not more issues. I'm shocked that there isn't massive problems showing up on this game. So what they do there, I got to give them props. They do what they do, and they do it well, and they know how to make this old ass hardware, this cell phone hardware, do tricks, right? And I said it again on PM and the PM, going back to 360 games, Steel, because I do play 360 games.
Oh, there's a difference.
But what I'm saying is, if you think about what the devs were doing with games, you go back and play some 360 games, it's amazing. It's a miracle that we ever got them.
Yep.
Okay. Again, I'll bring
Gears of War.
Yeah,
that's
Gears
magic.
of War. That's magic. Oblivion back in the day on a 360, and we found out. Todd said in interviews, we never knew it, but they actually had to reset the console behind the scenes while you were playing the game to reset the memory for the next area. Like that, we never knew those were the types of tricks, but for that old ass hardware, some of the games I'm playing, and sure, I still play some on 360, the ones that aren't backwards compatible, and I do play better versions on the Series X from time to time that are backwards compatible. But the fact is, when I'm going through these levels and I'm seeing what physics were being done back in the 360 era. It shocks me that they were able to pull it off. And Nintendo, it's no different. They mastered this hardware. They get every single little bit of blood, sweat, and tears they can out of this hardware, and they make it work. And they put out a game that can score a 97, whether you agree or not, whether Zelda's for you or not. And again, it's not for me, but I'm still not going to sit here and turn around and say, nope, game's trash, because look at it. Look at the graphics, look at the performance. It should be better. Well, yeah, I want Nintendo to compete in the high performance console market, but they're not. Let's be real. They're not. They're doing what they do. They're competing in the handheld market, and they're crushing it with the hardware that they have. And so it doesn't take away from the gameplay. It doesn't take away from the beloved IP that is Zelda. So for me, it's like, whatever, man. I mean, again, they did what they did. Got to respect them. They're selling it at $70. Millions upon millions of people are going to be playing this game already. We already know that. We saw the lines outside, which we haven't seen for a midnight launch in a long time. And that's Nintendo in a nutshell. So shout out to Nintendo. Shout out to Tears of Kingdom. Shout out to all the fans who got exactly what they want. If you're enjoying the game, if you're loving the game, man, do that. That's all we're about here. Play what you love what you play. It's the golden age of gaming. Hey, this year is fantastic for everybody. Period.
Yeah. My thoughts on that same aspect is, and it's a couple different places. The biggest thing for me is just consistency, right? I like to be extremely, I like to be consistent. So that's why there's certain things that I just won't do. Playing games at 30 frames, I'm not doing. I'll be consistent at that. I'm not going to play as good of a time that I'm having with Breath of the Wild. I'm also playing Breath of the Wild completely different than it was originally intended. And I only say that because if it was intended differently, Nintendo would make sure that there was a different way to play their games. The thing for me, and this is partially why I don't give Nintendo as much appreciation as others, is I think it actually de-appreciates their game when you don't allow your IP to be seen in its best light. And it is blatantly obvious when people are playing a game that is meant for the Switch on PC.
I was going to let you handle that.
That is the majority of what is currently happening for people that are streaming the game, or like you mentioned, like you stated, the enthusiasts. For those who really, they know what it is. You know that 30 frames for this game, again, to me personally, I think it's a criminal offense for this game to be running at 30 frames. And again, yes, it's on the Switch, and we can use all those reasons. Oh, what do you expect? This, that, and the other thing. Hardware, cool. I got you. And I'm not saying eliminate that. That is an option.
Don't matter. Right.
Good games are good games. Again, great. I'm not saying anything against it. My biggest issue that I will constantly buck back about Nintendo is that if you truly valued your IP the way that you say that you do, you would make it more accessible in other places so that it can be experienced in its best form. Because Breath of the Wild on PC compared to what you were getting on the Switch is two completely fucking different experiences.
Well, of course.
Right? And of course, you got Skyrim too, but Zelda is also a newer game.
Yeah.
Right? Nintendo being one of the biggest in this industry
embraces the PC. Nintendo
that too.
Hates
that
the
too.
PC, right?
There's definitely other aspects of it.
Yeah, there are. I agree.
I think it's unfortunate, and I will continuously fight back against Nintendo because it's one of the things that is super unfortunate about Pokemon Violet when I played it, is that the fucking game could be one of the most beautiful games, but it's so limited by the hardware, and they don't want you to access it anywhere else outside of having to pirate the game unless you or someone, and this isn't most people outside of the people that I know, for example, Kay Asante and myself, who will break the ISO down from off of your physical copy of the game, if you know how to do that, You're pirating the game. And again, do what you want to. You got to put your flag up. I got nothing against pirates, man. I'll be either joining or shooting someone when I get into Starfield. I like Pirates of the Caribbean too. It's a good movie. And I like Johnny Depp as the actor. Anyway, nothing against pirates, man. If that's the flag that you sell, you do your thing. I'm not going to sit here and say anything about that. And no, I'm Vic. I'm not using Dolphin. I also bought Breath of the Wild twice on the Wii U and then again on the Switch. But again, that game, this is my biggest thing that I'll say. So the jump from Wii U to the Switch, wasn't that major? Or was it major enough? Because again, a lot of people are saying that there's so many advancements that this game has that the first game didn't. Well, the first game came out on the Wii U. This game is coming out on the Switch. I would hope that they can add a little more up to the game. Especially when you compare it to the Wii. In OCD, that's the exact point that I'm getting to, is I blame Nintendo for people pirating their games. Now, people are going to do what they want to do, right? Emulation has been a thing. It's going to continue to be a thing. There is a conversation to also be had about game preservation. If the companies aren't going to do it, then what is the other way for us to do it? Again, to each their own. I'm not the guy to judge. I'm not God. I'm not anybody. I'm not this. I'm not that. But it is unfortunate that Nintendo couldn't at least find a different way to sell or find a way to embrace the digital era, to make their games available on their own service, for an example, Nintendo Switch app or whichever the case. If they can still be bougie about where you play the games at, but damn, at least we're in 2023, give me the option. So I don't have to jump through my hoops and bounds and do things the way the quote unquote legal way to do them that I'm aware of versus what some others may do, and putting more ducats in your pocket. I thought that's what companies cared about. Dollars in their pocket. Why for Nintendo is the console just enough? Oh, we don't have to do more than that. You're making a buku's amount of money on your software. There's no way that your development cost is $100 million. There's just no goddamn way.
They don't want to dilute their IP. Steel is what it comes down to.
But it's like, but I don't think it would dilute it though.
But they believe that. They believe that's part of what makes it special, right?
Sense.
Right.
What makes it special is the fact that the game looks grainy and we got to make our devs work harder than ever to get the game together.
Look at the fan base. Look at everybody. Everybody praises it. So yes, bro. Yes. That's part of the charm for Nintendo.
That's part of the charm.
Yes.
I think I
say agree
that.
With you know that.
I think we got it. But this is the reason that people put Nintendo in a different place when it comes to this when it comes to the gaming conversation. It's not the same as Xbox and PlayStation. And Xbox and PlayStation are direct competitors to each other. Mm-hmm. You can't sit here and say, oh, well, what about Nintendo? Oh, they don't have a problem doing A, B, and C. Look at what they're doing. Look at what's acceptable.
Yeah, it's genius.
You can get 10s out of 10s for the game looking and feeling the way that it does. Oh, it's a miracle. That's where the conversation goes.
Well, of course.
And again, nothing to get back from the game itself or to tell people not to enjoy it. Play what you love what you play, like Pong said. But that doesn't mean that we can't speak out about or not be consistent. At least that's what you'll get here on Live a Split Screen. Well, I will still be consistent on my expectation. And I will not be playing Tears of the Kingdom the same way I did not play Breath of the Wild. I didn't play Breath of the Wild until this year. For the first time. Yep. The game came out in 2017. 16 on the Wii U. Whatever. So if it takes that long for me to get into Tears of the Kingdom, Great. No, I'm not. It's not hurting me. I don't feel like I'm missing something out. But again, FOMO doesn't work on me like it may for everybody else. Mm-hmm. And this is my line. Just like anything else, you have to find out what your line is. And if this game is acceptable enough for you to plop down to 70 ducats, 70 bones for you to get in there and really enjoy it, great. I get it. But I do think that it is very backhanded for gamers because, again, if this is what you're willing to put up with, why do you think you're not going to get better? What makes you think that the Switch 2 is going to be astronomically better? What makes you think that the Switch 2 is going to let you carry over your games and you're not going to spend another $70 for that Tears of the Kingdom? And I hope that is something that Nintendo addresses. Because that is a way that they can start moving in the right direction, along with getting their fucking online capability together. Because, good Lord. Again, How do you have an IP like Smash Brothers that have the fucking worst netcode in existence for a fighter? You have no netcode. It's non-existent. But you have the best fighter on the planet. Arguably. Sold the most copies out of most games. It's just, I don't know, man.
We'll hopefully see it in the next iteration still when we get the new hardware finally next year at some point for Nintendo. And then they're going to resell this game yet again for the next hardware. And then people are going to play it on their brand new Switch 2, whatever they call it. And they're going to say, how did we ever play games at 30 frames? It's going to happen.
You're 5 years behind, right?
Well, right. I mean, again, I can't say anything because as a console-only player, I was too, right? I didn't have any. I still don't. I could still play games in 30 frames.
You're right, Vic.
I'm not. But we were that too. Console players always said, "What do PC players say? 60 frames? Who cares about 60 frames? Blah blah." We finally get 60 frames, and a lot of people are like, "How do we ever play games at 30 frames?" And I agree, especially in first-person shooters, right? So.
I mean, some people it's like 30 still acceptable.
Yeah, right. And then, like I said, I don't mind some 30 frames games, so I'm not that guy who sits around and says I will never play a 30 frame game. But at the same time, for Nintendo fans, this is exactly what Nintendo's going to do then. So they will resell this game for $70 on the Switch 2. It will be at 60 frames. It will finally be at a rock solid 1080 1440p, and then all of a sudden there will be a revelation of Nintendo fans who go, oh man, how do we ever deal with that back in the day? Well, you did, because you forgive and
you liked it enough.
Give allowances to Nintendo. Yes, 100%.
You liked it enough, so it was acceptable for you.
It was acceptable with that.
It's the same thing with Redfall. As many people are saying, again, I'm not going to say anybody's capping for the game. You feel how you want to feel about the game. Nope. If you feel like you're having a good time with it, hey, you can say that. But
as long as you don't say that there's no problems.
When the louder voice says it's a 57, it's kind of like,
and that could be wrong too, right? That could be wrong too. But there is. You have to acknowledge that there are, again, as we did with Cyberpunk, we sat here and said Cyberpunk was a great game, but we still acknowledged the issues that people were having.
Just that consistency.
Unacceptable. That consistency, yeah.
That's my main thing. I like to be consistent. So if anybody ever sees me say, hey, Steel, you're not being consistent, please let me know, man, so I can at least, because if you're not going to be consistent, then you have to be able to explain why. Why did it work before? Why didn't it work now? We got to be able to talk through those things, man, because again, gaming, I still do believe, is one of the places that we as a consumer have the most impact on. If a bunch of people stop buying Zelda, or if this Tears of the Kingdom sold less than Breath of the Wild, I think that they would hear the message. Now, they probably still hear the message, but they'll get to it whenever they feel like getting to it. And again, at the end of the day, as long as you're enjoying your investment, that's what matters. And most of your investment nowadays is time, more so than it is money. But when you do consider your money at that standpoint, again, we can't say that this is not acceptable and then you go play something and say that, oh, but this is acceptable. Or you say that, oh, this game is great, and you're playing it on PC at 60 frames, being able to upscale it and trying to tell people how amazing the game is. Yep. Like, that's not completely honest either, right? You're selling people on a completely different experience, right? So that's just kind of how I feel about that. But as part of the conversation, Tears of the Kingdom is going to be definitely a runner in the Game of the Year conversation. But and I wanted to bring this to you because you are a Bethesda fan. We talked about Bethesda earlier, talking about Skyrim and whatnot. But I wanted to bring this question to you because this is something I teased at the beginning of the show. But it was a point that I saw brought up, not just one place, but in multitude of different places. Where now I'm seeing that, well, I've heard some things that Starfield was never going to be a Game of the Year contender. Especially when you have games like Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom, and then Spider-Man coming at the end of the year. Although we know nothing about Spider-Man. Again, I'm not expecting the game to be ass, but it does. I have a lot of anticipation for the game, but I also have a lot of I can't think of the term for it right now. I don't know where my hopes and dreams are for that game yet, because I don't understand how they can evolve the combat further than what the first game. Now, could it be a Breath of the Wild moment where like people are like, oh, well, this is the same game, but you got these other things on it? Yeah, it could be. And again, with them involving Venom, you're already talking my language. But nonetheless, Hong, do you think that Starfield and the conversations around Starfield are more so based around, because again, there is a huge base of people that just like to downplay everything and they don't want to see the bigger picture, or maybe they just don't like those games. And again, they see, rightly so, Bethesda has become bugfesta for a lot of people. And there's a good amount of people who don't think that they'll ever put out a solid game. But before I pass it off to you, Skyrim is a game that has been out for over a decade, and the only game that I see that is still constantly getting mod support for, even in 2023, at a level that is kind of like insurmountable, bro. Like, there's not many games that go to this level, and mind you, there's other things behind that. But my point is, Skyrim seemingly, or the team at Bethesda have seemingly, especially with games like Fallout and what's the other one? What's the other one made by
Obsidian?
Obsidian, yeah.
Outer Worlds.
Thank you. In Outer Worlds, when you get these types of games and you see how they've aged more so like a fine wine over the years, right? Where you go back to the games, you either you have a good time with it if you're one of those, or you don't enjoy it. But maybe the game has even evolved past what you remembered. You get to spend another 100 to 1,000 hours into it, like you have here recently, within the last 6 months. Why, on one hand, do you think that people feel as though, in comparison, especially with a new IP, and again, maybe that's the fear. I think that's more of a positive for it more than anything else, because and you're using a new engine. So I think there's a lot more positives for it being a new IP. But why do you think that, in comparison to games like Tears of the Kingdom and a Spider-Man or a God of War or any other game that could possibly be released this year, or Jedi Survivor for an example, why would some people throw Starfield out of the conversation, or say that it potentially wouldn't even be part of that conversation, or has no chance to be, because of these other games around it? Let's start off with that. What makes you think that people are saying that? From your experience as a Bethesda fan.
Number one, as I always bring up, because the games are so few and far between when it comes to Bethesda's A team, because the games are so spaced out, people forget how big and how popular the games are. We've seen that with Diablo 4. We saw an article written that it looked like Blizzard might have a little hit on their hands. Again, people forget about some of these franchises. Number one, are these teams, the developers behind them, because these teams don't necessarily put out games on a regular basis. Number two, I think that a lot of it has to do with the landscape changing in games in general,
Right.
and where the industry is, right, and what people find to be popular nowadays doesn't necessarily mesh up with what was popular 10 years ago.
Which is why I
popular
mentioned
15
that
years ago.
the combat earlier on.
Yep, correct. So I think a lot of people look at that and say there's maybe not a place for a Bethesda style game, which I have to laugh at, obviously. But there's not a place for that type of game in the conversation in 2023, that people want the heavy narrative driven games that we've seen from Sony, or they want the classic nostalgia IP from a maker like Nintendo, and that's what really drives the market. And again, we talked about the differences between Breath of the Wild's open world versus a Skyrim or a Fallout. And those differences, some people find glaring these days, because we've heard the backlash at big open world games like Ubisoft has done it to death right now, Steel, with the open world fatigue that people feel. Sometimes, they associate that with a Bethesda game as well and say, I'm just not looking forward to it. It's not, I don't want that big open world. Like you said, Steel, when you fire up Skyrim, do I really want to sink hundreds of hours into this game? Like, is that where I'm at gameplay wise?
Dealing with mods and everything else. Right. The game is older. Things move forward.
Exactly. And obviously Starfield being a new IP is another hit, because nobody knows what to expect. If this was Elder Scrolls 6 launching this year, Steel, and Starfield, I think the conversation might be different.
Think so?
It might be different, because we've heard from the beginning, Steel.
Like a Skyrim 2?
Right. Like
we know 6 is coming. Elder Scrolls 6.
Yeah, we know 6 is coming, but whatever the case may be, that's a known IP. That is something that people can grasp. Like, what is this game? Well, I know what it's going to be. It's just going to be more of everything we've gotten. But what did we hear? And whether they were honest-based arguments or not, what did we hear the minute that we started getting the hype around Starfield? Well, how can you hype the game? You don't even know what it is. You have no idea what it is, right? This is a new IP. You don't know what this is going to be. You can't be excited for this game. So that new IP feeling as well, or that new IP kind of what I want to say, stereotype, like, well, you don't know anything about it. We don't know anything about it, so we can't be excited for it yet until we see it. Even after seeing it, people still, what is this game? Listen, I think all of those factors come into play when we're talking about a game of the year. People want that known quantity, Steel. Sure, a game like Elden Ring can come along and exceed expectations, blow everybody's mind.
Yeah. Anyway, I think Armored Core will.
Right, Armored Core could, but that's from software, right? With Bethesda, then you've also got the final piece of the puzzle, which is, as the decades have gone on, as generations have come and gone through gaming, Bethesda has taken over. You get a release like Fallout 76 that is wrongfully associated with the A-Team, but it's still got Bethesda's name on it. It still had Todd Howard's name attached to it. You get a whole generation of people who associate Fallout 76 with the entirety of, Elder Scrolls, Fallout, with the known issues that those games have had. Now you've got this legitimate buildup of people saying, well, no, it's just Bethesda. They can't make games anymore. Fallout 76, you saw that. They're on a downswing. Fallout 4 didn't hit the way people wanted it to. And they ignore all the history, because, again, that's in the past. People only see what's in front of their face. Mm-hmm. They don't look at the past history and say, well, no, they've got much more to their games than just the bugs. Even with the bugs, their games were scoring in the 90s, winning game of the year.
Yeah,
and we've had that conversation recently, right? Jedi Survivor came out with bugs. Critical acclaim, ignored the bugs because the game was so good, right? And we know that happens. Well, that's what used to happen with Bethesda games. We would ignore the bugs because the games were so damn good. You could Again, there are some of the bugs in Bethesda games that actually bring character to the game. I think personally, people could say, well, that's an excuse. You're just excusing bugs. No, there's certain bugs that happen that are make funny and that are,
Yeah, it's a game at the end of the day. Like,
it's a game, right. It's not game breaking. So I think all that comes into play when people talk about this stuff. But again, like I said earlier, I'll remind people that twice before a Bethesda A game has launched during the same year as a Zelda game and has won Game of the Year. So it is possible. Now in 2023, is it? Huh?
Which one?
Again, I think when did Skyward Sword come out? What year was it?
Oh, you said it beat a Bethesda game?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
No.
But you said
Bethesda beat Zelda.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah, it's happened twice. So it is possible. Is it possible in 2023? With a microscope on a brand new IP.
With a Switch that just sold 100, and announced that they did 120 million consoles.
120 million.
Which is damn it, God.
Is it possible for a Starfield to come out and do this?
Yes, too.
Of course, I think it is. Do I think it's an uphill battle? Do I think Zelda's a front runner? Yes, I said this last year. I said if Zelda comes out and hits, it's the winner. Like again, the Zelda bias is real. The Nintendo bias is real. It is what it is. I don't care. People have their fan bases. They have their fandom. They love that. That's fine. Is it possible that Starfield could set the bar to a new level? Yes, it is. Is it going to be because of graphics? No. The graphics are going to be much improved in Creation Engine 2.0.
Oh, is it going to be? They are much improved.
Yeah, they're much improved. But is it going to be a graphical powerhouse? No, it's not going to be a graphical powerhouse. Will it be much more up to date? Sure. So it's not going to win there, but neither is Zelda. Zelda's not going to win for the graphics as much as people want to say, oh, we like those graphics.
Nah, that's not why.
Okay. It fits the tone of Zelda, but look, come on. They're not pushing any boundaries. It's nothing big. So then you look at the other aspects. Well, then you get narrative. Could Starfield come out and blow people from a narrative perspective? Absolutely, they could. Bethesda's got some of the best writers in the industry. They are exploring a very well-loved sci-fi aspect type, keeping it real, interstellar type story.
Mm-hmm.
So could it come out and be considered one of the best sci-fi stories of all time, and in turn wind up pushing the narrative beyond what Zelda's doing, which a lot of people, again, there's some people who say the Zelda story is absolutely fantastic, and there's others that are like, I don't know what's really going on here, but I like it, right? So you could have it where it crushes it in narrative. Sandbox open world. Could it absolutely set the bar for exploration even beyond what people like to think of Zelda? Yeah, absolutely. Of course it could. 1,000 planets the size of space. Could it be that not every planet's going to be something? I mean, could it be that the exploration is still there?
Not every planet is that in real life. So.
No. But could they nail the exploration? Could they nail that sense of scope? Could they nail it so that people who are looking for that space adventure go, God dang, I've never experienced something like this? Yes, they could set that bar. Even beyond, again, people want to say No Man's Sky already exists. Could it be that different that people say, oh, well, now I understand? Yes, Bethesda can do that. Can they do it from a mechanic standpoint with the crafting, with the RPG aspects of it, with all of the stuff that they are known for? Yes, they could set the bar. So yes, I think there's the potential that Starfield could launch and blow people's minds, score in the 90s, and wind up taking the Game of the Year title away from Zelda. I think there is a possibility. Again, am I saying like 70%? No, of course not. I'm not dumb. No, this is an uphill battle, but I think that the Bethesda team has the potential, and it's just because, Steel, it's been so long since we got a game from these guys that people forget. And again, gamers have the shortest term memories ever. And yes, Breath of the Wild was 6 years ago, but 6 years ago compared, to a Bethesda A-team title. And again, Fallout 4 was not up to par. It sold crazy, right? It still sold like mad, but was it considered like up to par with Fallout 3? No. So you go back to Skyrim. Skyrim set the bar for Elder Scrolls for a lot of people. There's a debate whether or not Oblivion was better, but for most people, Skyrim set the bar. That's still being talked about. That's still being played 10 years later, and it's still considered the best RPG according to a large group of people. Again, Witcher 3's come along, and there's a certain group of people that think Witcher 3 is. We've had those.
Right.
But Skyrim still sets the mark for most people, or a lot of people, I should say, not most, but a lot. I don't know if it's most. But I think Starfield could do that. And if it does that genre defining, generational type Bethesda game that we know they're capable of producing because they've done it multiple times in their history, then yes, it'll be in the Game of the Year conversations. It's up to Bethesda to remind everybody why that still is a known thing, that Bethesda is one of the greatest Western RPG makers of all time. Why Todd Howard's name is synonymous with Bethesda. They remind people of that come September. And yeah, they're going to be in the conversation for sure. And they might win. 100%.
Yeah, I find it interesting the way that people tend to talk about games. And then how they also forget about how certain games have changed how we look at or have changed the dynamic of open world games, right? Yeah. The reason I will always give Breath of the Wild this kudos is because literally Breath of the Wild birthed other games of type. Genshin Impact wouldn't exist today without Breath of the Wild. Just that is what it is. I don't think it would have.
So?
No, not in the same, because Genshin Impact is literally built off of the same exact things of Breath of the Wild. Exact same things. They literally is the perfect example of somebody stealing something and then twisting it to their own, for their own purposes, right? And then putting other mechanics in the game to call it something different. It just doesn't have Link in it. If they put Link in that game, it would be, oh, this is just another Breath of the Wild. This is another Zelda game. Wow, this is great. And Breath of the Wild did invigorate open world games, but in a different way. Not in the same aspect of like a Skyrim, for example, where Skyrim, at least from me and from what I've been told and from what I've noticed, even this playing it recently, it's the world building, it's the character development that you always go back to and say, damn, well, there is so much to happen. This is just one section. And I have all this other map to explore, and every character that I talk to has some kind of engagement, and there's no telling where my story can really essentially go. Whereas with, again, like we made the point earlier, with like a Zelda, you may have a little bit different of an experience. This essentially is the same thing. You're still gonna go through the same story beats, like in that same manner. Where Skyrim is they kind of give you that freedom to explore it and put hands on everything.
Look, there's influence. There's no doubt there's influence. I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut.
No, you're good. You're good. No, you're fine. You're perfect.
Every game gets influence from somewhere, right? And I would say that Breath of the Wild took
I agree with that.
From open world games prior to it, like
I agree.
Elder Scrolls, like Fallout, and like
100%.
Put their own twist on it. So I see where you're coming from. Like I see direct correlation with something like Immortals: Fenyx Rising, right?
Oh yeah,
That's like
that's
Ubisoft taking Zelda and just
that's another one,
right? Yep. I just I go back and forth with this because Morrowind put open world games on the map, like back in the day, right? Morrowind was the first like really big game that kind of set up Bethesda, set up the Elder Scrolls, because Elder Scrolls existed prior to it.
Right.
But Morrowind changed it. Morrowind changed everything with how it handled the open world, with the vastness, with the scope, with everything that's involved. And then everything from there on, I think, has been influenced in some direct correlation, in some direct way or indirect way, based upon the popularity of Morrowind and the Elder Scrolls from there on out. And we've seen, copies of Elder. We were talking about one just the other day. Two Worlds came out and just copied because there was no other console game like Oblivion, and Two Worlds came out and leaned into it and said, "We're Oblivion on steroids," right? That's what they did. Breath of the Wild, to me, I have a hard time giving it that much credit. And again, maybe that's just me because I'm not a Zelda fan, but I have a hard time giving that much credit. Like I've seen reviewers say like Tears of the Kingdom is going to influence the next 5 years of gaming. Like how? Like what is it doing? Like
Because
again,
it's showing how you can take that Bethesda-esque formula and streamline it to and still have a game that feels vast but enjoy. It's just different, right? You're essentially doing some of the very same things, but it's different. It's Zelda. It's in that universe, and I think that does add on to it because the other thing too that adds on to that. I mean, of course, the IP having history, but it's just how they use those mechanics and use it for themselves. I guess that's what does it. Because then other games kind of take those similar formulas and create. I think that's what they mean. Not it's completely different.
Before any Nintendrons freak out, I'm not taking away from Zelda. I'm not trying to belittle or I'm not trying to take away from what Zelda is and why it's so great. I'm not, because again, I recognize it. I can recognize greatness whether I'm interested or not. I can recognize greatness. Right. The thing about Zelda is I just feel like what they do the best, what that team does over at Nintendo does best, is they take bits and pieces from a lot of other games.
No, they do.
And put it together in a beloved package, right? And they do it well. It's not like, oh, we've seen games take a bunch of mechanics from different games and try to throw them together and it turns out to be crap. Like it turns out to not work. Yeah. They integrate all these different mechanics and it is beautiful. Like they weave them all together and it is a beautiful tapestry and they wind up with game of the year quality games. So I got to give them credit for that. I just wonder how much direct influence outside of the popularity, the high profile aspect of Zelda, Breath of the Wild, and now Tears of the Kingdom. I understand why that high profile and those game of the year awards and those high scores influence other games, because then people look over and say, hey, we can do that. But we've had that with Bethesda titles too. The Skyrims, the Fallouts, they all elevated they all elevated the open world sandbox uniqueness of Bethesda titles to a degree where people were taking notice and there was games that came out that were influenced by them. So I guess when you said Genshin Impact, that kind of threw me off. That you think that was a Breath of the Wild that wouldn't be here without Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, no, I don't think it was. I think they even have hinted at towards it that being the case. Again, the stamina system is exactly the same. The way combat is approached is pretty much the same outside of it being more anime-esque, right? They took that exact same style. Even the movement, a lot of it is very similar to how Zelda moves in Breath of the Wild. It's just, yes, it's taking stuff from, again, Breath of the Wild is already a culmination of other games. Like, you put it perfectly. It is a culmination of different games. Again, that's what gaming is overall. Taking different games.
At this point, it's like movies. Every movie's influenced by something.
You taking the culmination of different games and you taking your IP and saying, okay, how do we make this different? The reason I use that Breath of the Wild to Skyrim comparison is because that's literally the only thing that I can compare it to, is that Breath of the Wild is easier to play because it's not as vast. It is. It's extremely condensed in comparison. But it is fair for you to say, and I do agree with you, that pulled from other open world games like Bethesda titles. But then, of course, a game like Genshin and other games are going to pull from now Zelda, because now that's the new baseline that people can look at and say, okay, they condensed this. I didn't think that was possible to take this open world and not make it Ubisoft-like. Because honestly, the only thing that Zelda really has, it's not Ubisoft-like. That's what makes it more in comparison to Skyrim, because it's like, hey, Breath of the Wild, literally do that first little mission, and then after that, it's like, here's do what you want. You figure it out. Hey, there's these 4 divine beasts. Pick one. Pick a direct. I mean, hey, I'd advise you to go this way. You can do whatever you want.
And then the journey along the way is another next step in the adventure.
Exactly. Because we've broken off. Exactly. But because we've refined it, and no matter what, when you go back and look at the map, you see that, okay, well, I've knocked out this part of the map. Okay, now go down here. And it's not like the map in Zelda is so vast, like you can't see everything like it is in Skyrim, where it's just like, bro, god damn, after 100 hours, you might be close to beating Zelda. After 100 hours in Skyrim, you're like, there's fucking still a lot more to explore. Like, where's the end? You know, it not now. If you mainline it, of course, it's going to be different. Yeah. And some people may make that same argument in Zelda, but at a certain point, it does.
Because you did that in Cyberpunk, right? So you finished Cyberpunk in what, 60 hours?
Yeah, right under 60 hours. But that was more so because I was way that I play games is just doing whatever the game makes me feel like I need to do.
Right.
That story, once I got involved, it was just like I was in. It was not like I was streamlined. I wasn't like intentionally doing it. It was just I would go do some missions, and I maybe do a side mission, and then boom, okay, now I was like, oh, I was ready to see what was happening next because I was so enthralled by it that I'll get caught up in like a side quest or whatever, and then I get a phone call. Hey, B, I'm like, oh well. Let's go find out what's going on. Like, I want to see what's happening. So there is that.
But the only reason why I brought that up was because I spent 300 hours doing and then I went to the main line, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's the difference.
Oh, my wife did the same thing. Spent about the same amount of time. Right, over 100 to somewhere between 100 to 300 hours she spent in the game herself, and she loves that game. She loves Cyberpunk. She's like uber excited about the DLC.
Yes.
So it's just it's weird when people throw certain games out of the conversation just because of I more so from what I'm seeing and from what I'm understanding, again, outside looking in, I like to take the RTS approach, ECP, whatever you want to put on there. Me looking at it more of an overhead approach, it comes across to me as just like there's a lot of people who are talking about these games who aren't genuinely interested in that style of game, or maybe their style of games have changed. Maybe they don't want a vast open world that may take hundreds of hours to explore, or they get caught up like myself or someone or like you and just taking the world for what it is, and you're adventuring and doing all these different things. Or maybe there could be like me where it's like, you want that combat element to it, and maybe it's not giving you that, and other games are giving you those things. There's so many variables that get put into it. And what throws me off about the conversation is seeing people sway their points to more so fit in line with what some of others are saying around them versus them genuinely saying, hey, this
nowadays,
is what I like. Yeah, and it is.
It's normal to me to dismiss. That would have been
like dismiss it.
That would have been like me dismissing Zelda when we first started talking about Game of the Year for 2023, or how big 2023 is, just because it doesn't interest me, to dismiss it and say, that's not going to be anything. It's it shouldn't be up for Game of the Year, blah blah blah. When I acknowledged that it was probably going to be the front runner if they did exactly what they did, right? But to me, to the other side of how you started this conversation about Starfield specifically, you can't dismiss a team as talented as Todd and A-Team or Bethesda and just say, oh, it's completely 100% over with. There is no way they're going to ever create a game that will be up there to compete or beat Zelda. That's just not true. The talent over there has the ability, has done it in the past, has the history. Again, do I say it's likely? No, I'm not saying it's likely, but to simply dismiss it as they're never going to make a game in 2023 that's going to compete for Game of the Year. No.
And when you look at their competition, the only competition that they have is Star Citizen and No Man's Sky for that style of game. That's not competition for their style of game. And that's my only point, right? No matter what, No Man's Sky would never end up being what Starfield is going to end up being, especially on a narrative standpoint. Now, No Man's Sky is vast, and I do enjoy No Man's Sky for what it is, but it's more of an exploration game. Yes, they have combat in there now, but it's not going to be to the level of what Skyrim is going to be at. In Starfield, what Starfield's going to be at least in my belief, from their previous titles, and what the different levels of not only your own weapons and armor and stats and how everything kind of combines with each other. I mean, shit. I mean, even fucking Dark Souls is pulled from that. In a lot of that aspect, right? Because you have those weight mechanics and whatnot. But
I don't know, man. It's interesting because I won't dismiss Spider-Man 2 either. I can hear how people say that that it's just going to be the same game, and like you, Steel, you don't know how they're going to evolve.
I don't know
what more they can do
combat-wise.
But again, I'm not going to dismiss Insomniac. I'm just not. I'm just not going to dismiss that they don't come up with some absolutely new, incredible way to experience Spider-Man, not changing the base game by any stretch of the imagination because it's successful, but adding enough to it where you and all the fans of Spider-Man sit down and start playing and go, holy shit, look at what they just did. Like, my God, I didn't think that they could do, I never even thought of this. Oh my God, they really did something special here. Like, I won't dismiss Insomniac because Insomniac's proven too many people wrong.
Yeah,
They've got a history. They are extremely talented. They are wizards and they know what they're doing. So again, I'll just never dismiss any team like that until the game comes out and we actually get proof. I mean, I won't. I just early.
And it's not, for me, Nix, it's not about sequels reinventing the wheel, but there is something to say about the best comparison that I can make is like the Arkham trilogy. Right? You can vastly see the improvements that were made. And see how they could have improved it. Like, you go back and play Batman Arkham Asylum, then you go play Batman Arkham City, you're like, yeah, this is definitely a more vast game. And then you go from Arkham City to Arkham Knight, you're like, wow, not only did they hit it on the narrative standpoint, but then the open world and the way they approached the combat and they extended it and made it more vast. Damn, that was different. I want to see that in Spider-Man 2, in Spider-Man also, but my biggest thing is just like there's certain IPs that historically, and it depends on who you're asking, but historically just don't take their IP and use it to their best ability. I'm not saying that I don't have faith in Insomniac. Of course I do. Of course I have faith in Insomniac. But for me, because they are going to be introducing Venom, at least from what they're showing, now we're hearing stuff about Kraven the Hunter, and it's like, Kraven's cool and all, but how are you going to implement him into the game? Don't have something like a Nemesis system, which I think Spider-Man would be the perfect game for that.
Every superhero game should have the Nemesis system.
Like, that is the whole basis of superhero game. They don't ever stop coming back.
I'd love to see somebody evolve it. Somebody create their own and evolve it to the point where it changed the story based upon what you did, or they had like new introductions, like how the villains were introduced, where they went, and what kind of missions they were doing, like evil doings they were doing, were based upon what happened within the Nemesis system. Like, that would be crazy. Like an ever evolving comic book. Bro, that would be huge.
That's why I'm hyped for Wonder Woman, because I mean, again, Monolith hasn't done any wrong for me personally. I enjoyed their games. But again, I have no reason to deny Insomniac, but it's the same way that I look at, I don't necessarily have a reason to doubt Bethesda either. I mean, you're literally going from a company that was trying to support themselves with their own games, trying to move through the digital era per se, right? And figure out what was going to help bring them in more money, because again, no, not everybody's going to play your game, right? And they have made missteps. I'm not saying that they're perfect, but in the same breath, I can't deny what they have brought to the table and say that, hey, for a new IP from your A team, for an idea that you've been sitting on for 20 plus years, I don't see how this would just be some mediocre attempt that could be comparable to a Fallout 76 or even a Fallout 4 for that matter of fact. I just don't see how that comparison will end up being drawn.
This might not be comparison to anything by the end of the day, with all the new mechanics, with the shipbuilding, with the base building all being implemented. If they do it right, Steel, this might not be like any other Bethesda title before it.
It might not.
So much where people go, holy shit, this is on another level. Like, we still got the sandbox, we still got the open world, but everything else that they've put in this game, this is on a whole new level. right?
Yeah.
And that might be the case.
That is highly possible. And again, we are dealing with hardware now. And hopefully, again, that's what I hope. I do hope that a lot of the focus on these delays that Starfield has seen is making sure that the gameplay is sound, making sure that the mechanics are sound, making sure that they use the breadth of what the console is capable of, right? That's what I'm hoping. And I do want Starfield to be one of the games to show people why, hey, this is why you need to have next generation hardware. If you don't have if you don't have a console, maybe you should get a series console. And if you don't have a PC, maybe you get one. And you jump in and really experience this world. So we'll end up seeing. Splendiferous asks, but which Batman is the best though? Arkham Knight. Arkham Knight is the best one. Story-wise, combat-wise, the overall feel of Batman himself, when he was truly in his darkest moments, especially dealing with that Joker serum and whatnot, poison, I should say, more so. I think that was how he dealt with Red Hood and all that. It was a culmination of, and I think Arkham Knight is the biggest reason why people look at Suicide Squad side-eyed, because it's like, how do you go from something that was so fucking great to that? Although me and Paul felt pretty good about it. So I don't know. I guess depends on how you look at it. But yeah, I'd have to give him the Arkham Knight.
I'll defer to you, sir.
But yeah, so that was again the conversations about Zelda and then also Skyrim. Skyrim and Starfield. We've kind of been talking about all three in a circle a little bit there. We got about 30 minutes before Pong needs to slide on up out of here. So let's see, what else can we get into today? We've seen Jeff Keighley get some more partners on board for Summer Games Fest. So you drop.
By the way, that's the Zelda video that I saw this morning that I mentioned. That was one of them.
Oh, that was one of them. Okay,
okay. That was one of them. Yeah, for people who don't know, Tears of the Kingdom is becoming a dick fest as people make creations. And you're seeing more and more videos. The fact again that they had to know, the team had to know this is exactly what's going to happen when you give people this type of creative freedom in a game. But it's hilarious that a Zelda game is being promoted with a bunch of penises. It's freaking amazing. It just never stops. Boats, robots, you name it. And there's going to be more as people figure out how to do more stuff in this game. So it's interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. What else we got here? We have seen Colin, Sacred Symbols. They've been talking about some interesting things this week. I don't have anything in particular that I would like to talk about from them. I didn't hear the specific clip. There are some other clips this week that they've been talking about as far as Xbox's development. Again, they have hammered down again in the show that I heard either Monday or Tuesday, I believe. They were talking about, Redfall and then the inabilities of Starfield probability, possibly, and why, they don't get why there's a hype around that or why people even have faith in that. But Pong, I mean, I do see that there's been some more recent things said here, as far as this conversation is going. What's going on now, man? Where do you want to take this conversation?
It's just, listen, it goes back to the hypocrisy. It goes back to the double standard when it comes to Sony versus Xbox. It is now well established, as I've been saying for the past couple of weeks. Sony fan base, there are no goalposts to move on the PlayStation side. It's basically at this point, almost literally, that Sony can do no wrong.
No, brand loyalty.
And I understand that a lot of people say, well, of course, it's been that way for a long time. But what I'm saying is at this point, the more and more that comes out as we go through this generation, the more obvious it is that this generation of PlayStation enthusiasts have been trained to the point, much like Nintendo fans, where it doesn't matter what the company does, they're going to have a positive reason for it. And this week it came down to, because we saw more closings and cancellations this week from Sony. And that's kind of what culminated. And that's what the clip from Colin was there, Steele. Colin said that, oh, well, PlayStation
really sets the bar high for their quality. So obviously they went in and took a look at these teams and the games that they're making, and they're not nines. He literally said they're not nines. So, it sucks for the team. Never like to see people lose their jobs, but that's Sony quality. That's Sony quality control. So they canceled the games. Bro, if again, we're up to like 4 between Dreams to what was the latest?
This one is Deviation.
Yeah, Deviation, right? So between Dreams and Deviation, this has all happened in about a month and a half. We either have closures or cancellations of games and layoffs in 4 different instances from Sony. If that happened in a month and a half with Xbox, I don't care if they're third-party teams.
I mean, it did already. It happened with all the 343 conversation when people were
right
leaving.
with the 343. But I'm just saying, we had a span of a month and a half like this with third-party teams being decimated. In some instances, 40 to 60% of their people being laid off because Sony walked in and canceled a project that they had with them. Bro, the uproar, the questions, what is Xbox doing? How could they do this to these third-party teams? Why are you signing deals with these third-party teams if you don't intend upon completing your projects? What is going on? The mismanagement continues for Xbox. Like, that would be the word on the street. But out here, nothing. And then you got people like Colin coming out and saying, oh, no, it's just part of quality control. They just want to make sure they're getting 9s out of all their teams. They just want to make sure their games are straight up the best that they can be. This is the never-ending hypocrisy from the media, from the fans. It doesn't matter. This stuff should be talking. Deviation Games, Steel. Do you remember? They did a huge announcement last year about this. And it was like a big, exciting moment. They had him on stage. Excited now. Deviation Games. Deviation Games is made up of former Call of Duty.
I do remember that. Yep.
Oh, Deviation Games partnering with Sony, working on a shooter. This is going to be huge. It's going to be big. They actually did after that. They had a video from Deviation Games touring the studio where they had PlayStation logos up everywhere. Their entire studio was PlayStation. Like, they were getting ready to be acquired, Steel. Like Haven, like all these they were getting ready to be acquired. Like, this was a partnership made in gold. Sony just walked in and canceled the game this week. They also canceled a sci-fi game from another third-party publisher this week. Third-party studio, I should say. Sony had a sci-fi game that was being made, already in development for 3 years. Steel, for 3 years it was in development. They said it was 2 years or under away from being released. That's how close. They walked in and canceled it this week. Studio had to lay off 40% of their people. Bro, I don't.
I guess it's quality, but I don't know.
That's business. But this stretch over the past month and a half means that Sony's back into Jim Ryan is cutting the fat. He's trimming the fat.
Yeah,
he's trimming the fat. And again, you have every right as Sony to make that decision as PlayStation, right?
I don't know what your business is. So
no. And again, that's fine.
But they have been cutting some of their budgets and stuff.
And there's people who believe that Xbox should have walked in Arcane and absolutely canceled Redfall. There's that conversation that they should have looked at because of the damage it has done in some people's eyes. Rand and Jez just talked about this yesterday. Rand and Jez both believe it should have been canceled because of the damage that it did, because it's got your name on it. And PlayStation's no different. PlayStation has a seal of quality, and if your team's not cutting it and they walk into your studio and they look at it and say, that ain't PlayStation, well, then they have the right to do it.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is the hypocrisy, because if Xbox was doing this the way that this has been going, again, this is like project number 4. The way that Sony's going about this in this short period of time, again, we've seen one person leave a studio and there be questions about what Xbox is doing and what mismanagement's going on. You're talking about entire projects being canceled. You're talking about teams having to cut 40%, 60% of their staffing because Sony walked in and said,
yeah, it's not like they moved it.
Right.
That's the other thing too. It's not like, for quality purposes, you're not going to release this game, but we do have other games for you to work on. Or I need you to move in this direction. It's just like, that's not going to work.
That's not gonna work.
But again, I mean, this is an industry where they kind of build up and build out whenever they need to, right?
Yep.
They can drop the ball, pick it up whenever they want, which is unfortunate, but it also doesn't speak to the health of the internal. What's a good word for it? The internal mental capacity, maybe, for some of those teams, right?
No, psychologically, you're putting all your eggs in the Sony basket, and if they come and smash your eggs, what are you going to do? You're a small dev team. This is the bad side. This is the risk factor involved with starting and opening up a new studio in this industry. It is highly risky. That's why I say acquisitions are good in a lot of ways, because it takes that risk away from these small teams. You are one decision, one game away from potentially losing your studio when you first are starting out. Deviation Games just started. This project was their first game that they were doing, right?
And I mean, if you want to say,
now they gotta go back to drawing board.
If you want to say quality, then I mean, I don't know if that quality bar is worth it enough. Like, how do you on one hand say that our player base isn't spending enough or buying enough of our games, and then on the other hand say, oh, but it needs to be a 9?
Right.
The games as a service games that you're releasing are not going to be 9s. Like, anybody that thinks Factions is about the release and think it's going to be a 9, you're going to be heavily mistaken. I think if PlayStation thinks that Factions is going to come out and be a 9, I hope that it does. I hope that it releases and it completely reinvigorates how we look at third-person multiplayer. Maybe. I haven't seen a game do that since Gears of War. Mm-hmm. And there's not or a Division or but that's a Tom Clancy IP that has a history of games that were already doing something similar. The only other game that changed that up was Gears. You can't say Uncharted. Like, I can't give any credit to Uncharted because it didn't make any of a splash. Like, I didn't even know Uncharted had multiplayer. But people were talking about Gears. People were talking about Ghost Recon when those were popular. People were talking about SOCOM for, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, if it's quality, I don't know if that necessarily makes sense either, unless you're saying, but man, it was just so bad that 3 years later, you didn't do any check-ins to see whether the game was okay. So now 3 years later, the game is not where it needs to be. It's like, you know what? Whatever.
And we'll never know.
Yeah, we'll never know
the reasons behind it, right? I'm just going with what people are saying.
Weird.
This is what Colin was saying. This is what people in the community are saying, that this is a part of Sony's quality control. They've done this in the past. They've been known to be pretty hard on third-party developers, when it comes to their games. But they're partnering with all these smaller teams still to create diversity in their lineup, because that's what they're lacking.
Right.
So they've been going to these smaller teams, acquiring these smaller teams like Haven, Jade Raymond's new studio and stuff. They've been doing this to try to expand that diversity, to expand that lineup, to start filling in some of the missing pieces that they do have in their first party lineup after a generation that they didn't have to focus on diversity. Now they know that they have to. Well, now all of a sudden, all these projects are getting chopped. Like, we're okay. Where's your diversity going to come from? What do you got in the pipeline? Like, what if you partnered specifically with these teams to try to create some new experiences for PlayStation users, and you're canceling them right away? Okay, well, what does that mean? What is your lineup going to look like 5 years from now? Are you going to have enough on the pipeline? Again, I don't think Sony's in trouble in any way, shape, or form. We all know this. They're not. But I'm just saying, it kind of leads to the question. It kind of questions like, okay, well, if you are now to the point, if you've isolated yourself so much that you believe that only your first party teams are able to meet the quality standard of PlayStation, and that third party teams are going to have a very difficult climb to release a game, I gotta ask, like, are you putting yourself in a bigger corner? Because then you're just saying only your first party teams can produce what we want.
And that's,
like, you know what I'm saying? You're limiting yourself
And that is definitely that becomes a bigger problem because again, like I mentioned just a few moments ago, you can't say that your base isn't buying enough games and games are costing more to make.
Yeah.
You know that bringing out those 9 out of 10 games you're talking about, that quality bar, like a God of War or Horizon that you want to use for those examples, Horizon almost cost $200 million to make. God of War, the same. And you're going to continue to spend this type of money on these games and only sell 30 and then get to 30 million 5 years later? Is that sustainable for you? It can't be because you just said it wasn't.
Yeah, according to Jim.
You just said it wasn't. So where is the truth in that?
Right.
Now, again, only they're going to know what is capable, but I just don't see what's making sense. And we're not going to know because they haven't put out a showcase to tell you that, hey, this is what our pipeline looks like. And I think that this might be part of the reason why they haven't put a showcase together. Now, there's rumors coming out now that there may be a showcase at the end of this month at some point, or around the end of this month at some point, where they're going to do another Hopes and Dreams kind of presentation. But again, like, Stellar Blade is a single player game. It's still, as many people may call it, stellar ass or whatever case. Everybody's obsessed with the booty for her. Not everybody's going to play that game. Again, as great as Devil May Cry is, not everybody plays Devil May Cry.
Not everybody plays Bayonetta. Not everybody plays those games.
You know what I mean? So it's like, it's cool that they got that under a publishing deal.
Yep.
I'm going to be happy to see that game to come to fruition, but you're also limiting it to your platform of people that already have a hard time buying your games. So it's like, for me, and from what I'm seeing out of, like, you can have all the quality games that you want, but I've stated multiple times here, God of War can be quality, but it's not a game for me. So when am I going to get those games for me? Stellar Blade is a game for me. It's not a game to get a console for. Final Fantasy 16 looks great, but it's not a game to get a console for me, right? So it's like, for me, when I ask these questions and then you see these backhanded kind of situations happening behind the scenes, and then people saying that, oh, well, that's quality, where at what point do you say, because you can't look at Xbox and say, oh, well, their problem is quality.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Xbox also has a higher retention rate than you, doesn't put out as many quality quote unquote games as you say that you do. Has more of a variety of games. Doesn't have the fan base that a Sony or a PlayStation does.
Mm-hmm.
And is quote unquote still successful in their own eyes. They had to change some things, and Phil again came out and said, "Oh, we got to do things differently," because Nintendo and PlayStation, they have a foothold. And then you say, as Sony, the corporation, is like, "Well, we're doing 10 service-based games, and we got Factions coming, and 6 months before we release Factions 2, we'll tell you that Factions isn't coming. Then 3 years later, we'll show you a picture. Now we got our own player base making rumors out here that, oh, it's going to release this year in 2023. We might have something to show you this year in 2023 based off of our last show that we showed you a picture for. Factions also didn't get the player base that they were looking for, I'd imagine, which is why it's not incorporated with the PC version of Last of Us 1. So you're taking away elements of games while saying you're working on service-based games, but not taking advantage of something that you already have on the forefront that you could use as a metric. Again, I'm not a dev. I don't know how much is going to go into it, but I do think that it does speak for a bigger picture. And one of my main concerns for Sony is I don't know how they venture the multiplayer gaming space. Because as they've stated, something that they want and it's something that they need in order for you guys or for the player base to continue to get the quality games that they're looking for. Nick says there's objective quality and there's quality that appeals to the masses. These companies want to appeal to the masses. That's my sharing. That's the end game. Nix, I disagree. Because you can have a game that appeals to the masses, but still takes 5 years to sell 30 million copies. Where you have an Elden Ring that sells 20 million copies in less than a year. So quality is subjective. And as much as God of War, again, I'm only using this as an example because this is what people use as the biggest quality bar. I mean, if you could throw Spider-Man in there, you could throw any of their games in there as a quality bar. Let's use Horizon now as a quality bar. If Horizon is a quality game and that's what appeals to the masses, then why was it again overlooked by Elden Ring? Why was it firstly overlooked by Breath of the Wild? Quality matters, though, overall. That's what the masses see. Obviously, that's not what matters the most. Because in that aspect, if you're saying that that's what appeals to the masses, then the masses would sell your 90, I say 90 million PlayStation 4 for an example, because somebody used a great comparison. It was like, hey, yeah, PlayStation 4 could have sold, have 130 million consoles out there, but let's be frank, it's probably about only 90 million of those people that really use those PlayStation 4s kind of like on a daily basis. There's so many other pieces to the puzzle that I don't think that even Sony has yet. And they wouldn't have made the comments that they've made up to this point if it was just as simple as hey, let's make quality games. I don't think it's just that anymore. There's more to that conversation. I do want to start winding things down for you here, Pong. So based off of this, what we're speaking to now, like, what is your standpoint on kind of like how you're seeing Sony's quality bar kind of being measured, them also being, at least to me, I believe they are slightly being backhanded. Like they're saying one thing over here, but then saying another thing behind the scenes, and then also trying to appeal to more players. Like, how is this being portrayed to you, and how do you see things kind of swaying? Because right now, I mean, both sides, at least to me, are in a boat that's on very tough waters right now. Right, it could go any way. Sony just has let's say, a better built boat because of their player base.
Yeah, their popularity.
What do you think?
Their popularity. No, I mean, I think again, I will never question a company who wants to have great quality control and who does, care about their name being put on a product. Again, we saw this back in the day, Nintendo's seal of quality, right? That's what they did. That was like the standard. Like if you saw the Nintendo's quality seal on a game, you knew that game was going to be polished and it was going to be up to Nintendo's own standards internally. So I think that that's important. That's important for any brand. And I wish that, obviously that there were certain games like a Redfall from Xbox that did get more hands-on, that the Xbox made tough decisions. Yeah, because I do think so. But I think that the quality meter, as we've talked about, Steel, the standard that people like to put out there has changed dramatically for the worse. We are now at a point that any game underneath an 8 or doesn't score in the 80s is trash. That's what people say.
Yeah.
And I hate that. I hate that because that is not how we used to play games. That's not how we used to judge games back in the day whatsoever. And I think that part, that comes in part from both, PlayStation and what they do, and how their player base has now been trained to think that way, that any game, but it's also a double-edged sword, like we were just talking about, Steel. When you train a fan base to believe that anything that's less than, and we're almost to the point now, anything less than a 9, well, let's say high 80s, 85 or above is not acceptable. Well, then you miss out on a lot of great experiences, and you miss out on the opportunity to put out a lot more content for your fan base that would give you the diversity in your lineup like we're seeing from Xbox. Like I said, if I had to choose between both, I love what Xbox is doing. So we might not have the Spider-Man. We might not have The Last of Us right now. I would rather be playing Age of Empires 2 Definitive Edition. I'd rather have the opportunity to play the multitude of games coming from Xbox than I would from the limited first, and we're talking first party here. We're not talking third party, but we're talking first party, than the limited types of games over on PlayStation. And again, that's a me thing. It's personal. Again, everybody's own standards are going to be different. Everybody's own opinions are going to be different. What you think is quality might not be quality to me, and vice versa. That's fine. I don't have a problem with that whatsoever. But from Sony as general rule, when it comes to the popularity of certain types of games, still, again, I gotta ask. I saw a game like Ghostwire Tokyo launch exclusive. Launch exclusively on PlayStation.
Yeah, enough people talking about it.
Not enough people talked about it. And sure, it didn't receive the critical reviews that, of course, we'd like to see from games. It was in the 70s, right? I think it might even been high 60s, whatever. But it got completely overlooked. Nobody on PlayStation tried it out. It drops into Xbox Game Pass. I'm not saying it set the world on fire by any stretch of the imagination. The game isn't going to be for everybody. But I played the hell out of the game, still playing the hell out of the game. That game is much better than its ratings. It is a quality game. It has a lot to offer. It is fun as hell. And again, if you don't agree with me, that's fine. But I'm saying that it just got completely silenced from the PlayStation side. Again, which boggles the mind. Right. It wasn't a first party, home run, third person, narrative driven game. And so they dismissed those games. And I think and again, this is my opinion.
Right.
I think this is part of the reason why you saw Sony corporate come out and say people aren't buying games anymore. Well, because your fan base is only sitting around waiting for your first party titles. They're only sitting around waiting for your third party exclusive games that you push. That's what you've trained your base to do. And other games come out and they don't get the attention. They don't get the love. They don't even have people trying them because that's not what they're looking for. They're only looking for one certain type of game. Whereas on Xbox, we get thrown so much stuff between Game Pass, between the diverse lineup of first party, third party titles coming in, that I believe the Xbox fan base is more willing to try games. And is that a product of Game Pass? It damn well is. And that's exactly what Xbox wanted. They wanted to turn more people into grazers.
Harder for you to pull away.
Yep, grazers have more opportunity, more likelihood of trying new games and buying new games and trying in different areas, not just one type. So I think from that aspect, Sony with their standards, and again, yes, I know there's Ratchet and Clanks out there. Yes, I do know that they make other games. But generally speaking, there's one style of game that the Sony...
It's single-player games.
Right, it's a single player experience, heavily narrative driven. Right, that's what they want. They want that movie like game experience, and that's what they're looking for because that's all they praise, and that's all they want. And again, we're not talking about the casuals. We're not talking about the wider market. The wider market is gobbled up by Sony in a lot of ways because of their popularity. It's a popularity contest. Yeah. It's a brand power.
It's Apple. It's literally an Apple versus.
And we had this conversation last night. Jasper brought it up. It's Apple versus Android.
It's literally, yeah.
That's what it is. And that's fine. Again, that's Sony's marketing genius. Again, they did this in the electronics. For those of you not old enough to remember, when Sony dominated electronics, when Walkman, if you had anything other than a Walkman, you had trash. That was literally how it was in the 80s and 90s. They know how to do this, and they've done it well. But what I'm saying from the gaming standpoint, when you put this kind of pressure on your first party studios to deliver time in, time out. Ben's studio delivered a great game in Days Gone. It didn't get the love. I think I played it. I liked it. And I thought it was a really good game. But because of the Metacritic, what did Sony do? No sequel. You're now a support studio. Oof. Listen, now there's part of your fan base that goes back and plays that game and goes, actually kind of like Days Gone. Days Gone should get a sequel. That's the kind of that's the weakness from doing it that way, is that you do put yourself into a corner, and if you can make you make decisions based upon that type of philosophy, you're going to miss out on some opportunity. Yes, you may not put out a Redfall like we just saw Xbox do, right? You may not have a Redfall happen, but you're also not going to have a whole lot of other games that might have the opportunity to expand the diversity in your lineup and expand the tastes of your fan base beyond what you've been giving them for an entire generation. You lose out on those opportunities as well when you kind of hold yourself to this. So again, there's give and take. I personally like the way Microsoft's doing. Yes, I believe Microsoft could do a better job hands-on.
They need to do a much better job. Man.
But I don't want them to just simply be Sony. Like Phil said, we're not trying to create the one game to rule them all, which I love. I want to hear that. I want to hear you want to make great games, but I want to hear you want to make great games everywhere in all different formats, even genres that don't interest me. I want you to make great games, right? If Banjo-Kazooie comes back, it won't be for me, but I hope it's the best damn Banjo-Kazooie game ever made, right? That's what I want. So again, it's a tough situation to be put in, Steel. But again, their fan base is telling you exactly what it is. And again, we're talking about the enthusiasts, not the wider audience. The enthusiasts are telling you exactly what Sony has been marketing to when they spew this stuff. Like, again, any game underneath an 85 nowadays is trash. We don't want any other game. We want that narrative-driven game. We don't want the Gears of War. We don't want those games over here. Those games are trash. They're telling you exactly what Sony has done marketing-wise to make this premium experience, quote unquote, premium experience. And that's, I mean, you got to believe them. When they tell you that, you got to believe them. That's what they want. So it is what it is.
Yeah. And again, there's a lot to be worked on both sides. Again, yes. I do want to see Xbox get more in line with getting that quality control underway. Making sure that people are at least able to see, because again, there is an issue when you have your number one IP in Halo release and it's not received well. That's there's a lack of foresight there. Redfall's another one. You look at that and say, hey, no, I don't know if that's going to be it. I think you guys need some more time. I don't know. But again, we also don't know how these deals work in the behind the scenes and what is in place that causes these things to happen. Because again, maybe they still had an internal deadline that they had to meet. And like Phil mentioned, maybe it wasn't worth it delaying anymore.
Right.
There's a lot that goes into it. And no, Sony hasn't been particularly quoted saying 85 below 85.
When did I ever say Sony said that? When did I ever say that? I said they're fans. They're fans. Again, when Colin does something like he did, and he said they're walking into these studios and seeing that these games aren't a 9, that's the mentality from the enthusiasts that I'm talking about. Am I saying that it's 100% across the board? No, of course not. But that's the mentality. That's the philosophy. And you can see it with Sony. When Ben puts out a game that scores under an 8, what happens? They don't get to do a sequel, and they are put on as a support studio. So you kind of have to trust your eyes and ears on this, Nix. But no, Sony never said that. But you can see that's where they're going. Do they still have a game like Destruction All-Stars coming out? Yeah, they did. They had a game like Destruction All-Stars coming out. They realized too late that game wasn't going to be what it was. It was going to be a full-price game. And then they found out, then they looked internally and said, oh, yeah, then we're not going to sell this as a full-price game. We'll change direction. But do you think they're going to come out with Destruction All-Stars 2?
No, that's not happening.
Hell no. Hell no.
That game didn't hit. Anyway, nonetheless, each company is going to be different. Each company is going to try to do things in their own way. We all know that. Again, my main concern is seeing Sony take that turn from being more single player focused to being more multiplayer focused, and also being more diverse. And again, I can only talk about from my own opinion also. And I'm not saying Colin speaks for the wider enthusiast base, but even from my personal experience, things are vaguely skewed towards Sony's direction. And again, I'll say they wouldn't have made the statement saying that our gamers are not enough if there was people that were investing in those quality games. That's not why they're there. Most people are there because Sony's a recognizable brand. PlayStations are something that you can put some faith into. And it is hardware. And traditionally, Sony's hardware has been of quality. With that said, it makes sense that games like Call of Duty, your Fortnites, and other games to that nature would do well over there. I was gonna throw. I could throw a little bit more sauce on that topic, just to be messy. There was a thing between my friend group that we used to have, and really it was just kind of, to me, I've been able to prove it. I know there's more. You get into the community, you'll find more people that are more like you. But traditionally, this is something that was between my friend group, just like the whole single player gamers were casuals. Perspective that I had previously. So was the PlayStation gamer would never be good at multiplayer games the way the Xbox gamers are, or PC gamers are. PC gamers, one, I mean, we have been doing it for quite some time, but then the Xbox, the reason why we used to say that about Xbox gamers is because we had to pay for online. You know what I mean? So it's just like, it was more probable, especially when they introduced crossplay. This was a huge thing that was going on online. Smack talking in the lobbies and whatnot, where you ran into Sony players that weren't as good as your competitor, who was playing on the opposite platform. It happened to be some truth to that. And I'm not just talking about, oh, this person said no. I'm talking about what I put to practice. All right. I had a cousin who was strictly a PlayStation player, right? Was killing it on Call of Duty on PlayStation. He came over to Xbox and was like, bro, why is this game harder on Xbox? He was like, why do people seem like they're smarter on Xbox for whatever reason? Like, I was being funny, and I just told him because we pay for our service, man. Like, I don't know. You're paying for something. You want to make sure that you're doing good at it, right? That conversation has kind of went to the wayside more so recently because multiplayer gaming has become more free to play, right? And it should be, but that's just the reality of the situation, that there are, outside of the fighting game era, Sony did become more single player focused, where Xbox became more multiplayer focused. Not everything works on a multiplayer standpoint because Xbox doesn't have those PC games that hit on that multiplayer standpoint, right? Not all of them. And you just see the different directions that they're going. Again, as much as I want Sony to put out a quality version of Factions and it be everything that I want, it's the same way that I understand that people want a quality game from Xbox, right? That's in that same breath of a Horizon or a God of War or these X amount of number of different things. Same things that I'm asking for one game in Factions. I want it to be I want Sony's foray into multiplayer gaming to be just as quality as their single player games. And I don't see that, which is why that quality conversation is hard for me, or them bringing in Bungie is hard for me, because I don't see that in Destiny still. Great, it's survived as long as it has, but you can't put everything on Bungie to fix your problems. Factions was, again, like I mentioned earlier, was slept on for Sony. So I don't see how putting more eggs in that basket fulfills what you're looking for as far as the service-based games go, especially after all the smoke Last of Us 2 got. Right? So that's the biggest aspect that I'm coming from on that. Yeah. Again, it's going to be interesting to see how things play out.
Sony's going to have to adjust their marketing steel.
Yeah.
They're going to have to learn how to market multiplayer to a fan base that they've developed that isn't necessarily, and again, still tons of people play Call of Duty, still tons, but from their first party aren't necessarily looking for multiplayer games. They're going to have to learn how to market and push those games as a service
outside of Call of
into the
Duty and
forefront.
sports.
Right, exactly. That's what I'm saying. They're gonna have to push that forward and learn how to do that all over again. They used to.
Yeah.
Back in the day, you had your SOCOMs, you had your multiplayer games that were giant, that were popular, but you haven't done it in a long time. And you got to relearn how to get your fan base excited for that aspect, because you're going to throw them at factions and they're going to be like, yeah, but when's Last of Us Part 3 coming?
Yeah, exactly. No, that's that's exactly what's going to happen.
Right,
yeah.
right. This is great, but where's Last of Us 3?
Yeah, because I don't care about this.
Right. So there's going to be a lot of that. And again, we're talking about the enthusiasts. We're talking about the fanboys within Sony, not the casuals. You might get some casuals in there to play it, but there's so much competition in the multiplayer space nowadays. It's tough. So
yeah, and again, it's not that factions has to be the end all be all Knicks either.
No.
The main thing for me is that that's their closest service game that they have coming.
Yep.
Outside of their other ones, and
we know of.
That's why I keep speaking to that one, because that is, in my personal belief, is one IP that has the power to start that conversation like Gears did, like Halo did, like Ghost Recon did back in the day, like Rainbow Six did, like these other games have done. So that's more so what I'm. But we'll see. I got hope, but man, Sony has let me down previously in their support, and especially not bringing factions over for PC players to experience so they can see what that was like. Doesn't give me a lot of faith. But again, this
is what competition's about. This is why we love this industry. It's getting these companies out of their comfort zone.
Yeah.
Right? It's getting these different companies out of their comfort zone, especially somebody like Sony, who's been number one in the high performance market again.
Right. Whatever that is, yeah.
Whatever that is. Again, between the two, Xbox and PlayStation, Sony having that lead for so long, getting so comfortable in that spot, getting them out of their comfort zone and offering more to gamers in general. That's where we all win. And the same goes for Microsoft. The pressure on Microsoft to somehow compete now gave us Game Pass, now gave us them expanding in all these other places. Now the next step is, and Phil obviously in that interview knows it, is they've got to make sure their games are on point when they launch. So that helps us as gamers as well. That's the competition back and forth that we want to see, that makes things so great. So who knows? We might get the next greatest multiplayer coming from a Sony first-party studio that everybody has to go buy a PlayStation to play. Who knows? You just don't know. Don't know. Yeah.
So a couple quick hitters before we go ahead and wrap things down. I will be skipping out on This Day in Gaming, just because I know we are on a time here. Couple quick hitters. Square Enix still doesn't know what the hell they're doing, apparently. They don't know what's best for them. They cut another exclusive time deal, although their numbers are continuously looking negative for them.
Right.
I don't
NFTs are going to save them, Steel.
Yeah, right. Their operating profit is down 25%. Their sales are down 6%. Their digital entertainment sales are also down by 12%. And no comments on Forspoken sales, which tells me, hey, sounds familiar to what FromSoft used to do with Armored Core. I don't know if that game's even sold 1 million copies.
And to put this into perspective, we got updates from Square on the games that they said were disappointing, like Avengers, like Outriders. We got updates on those sales, but Forspoken, and again, I still want to play Forspoken. I think I would enjoy Forspoken.
I like
legit. From what I've seen, I think it would be a game that I would like, but to not say anything from Square about Forspoken means, it's probably.
I don't think it sold 1 million copies.
It might be.
I think it might
be just over mill.
I think it might be more so around what Returnal did, if not less.
It could be.
500K, which is no wonder why you said, I'm good. Yeah, man, it's going to be crazy to see, because a lot of people are hyping up Final Fantasy 16. Again, a game that's going to have combat that Final Fantasy fans said they don't like. But everybody is apparently saying it's going to be the greatest game ever to release this year also. So that's another one that's also in that conversation.
Looks gorgeous.
It does look really pretty. The combat does look like it's going to be some fun. But again, it's a third-party game. We'll see how it goes. Also, Hogwarts Legacy is coming to the Switch on November 14th. Let's see if this is the final delay. The fact that they're still adamant about releasing this game on the Switch. This is a game that I'll say, all right, if you guys are able to do this, somebody needs to either acquire this studio or WB. This is where your money needs to go at from now on. Because Lord Jesus, if they're able to get a Hogwarts Legacy running on that Nintendo Switch and it still be a comparable experience, like people can still enjoy it, they're one of the greatest studios that exist to date. That's impressive. I'm actually hyped to see what that's going to look like, because that game is extremely demanding on PC also. Currently, especially when you involve ray tracing and things like that, there's just so much attention to detail in that game that hopefully it doesn't take away enough from their original creative vision, right? That's the main thing for me. CMA is back in the conversation again. More things leading off into the direction that this deal may end up going through. A lot of backhanded comments as far as what's going on behind the scenes. Nothing necessarily that I think is worth I haven't looked enough into the details of some of these things. Busy through the week to see where the impact is going to be. I know the ROG Ally was also given a pre-order.
I was just gonna say, Steel, real quick on that.
My fault.
No. It just next week, EU comes down with the decision.
Yeah.
Again, don't hold your breath. But that again, if the EU blocks, I don't see a way forward. So right now, the word is, that was this week's news. The word is the EU is going to approve, which makes things very interesting. But I'm not going to hold my breath, because we heard the same thing about the CMA.
Yeah.
So we'll see. But we should get a decision from the EU. People are expecting it on Monday. So
okay,
hopefully we'll
be interesting to see.
talk about. Yeah, because if they block, I don't see a way forward. So we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, again, it's going to definitely, if they do block, on one hand, I want to see. On one hand, I want to see what happens if it does get blocked, how Microsoft responds to that, how Xbox responds to that, how they pivot. Because again, the unfortunate part of this is that the human element of it is going to be lost at the end of the day, which is the other super unfortunate part of it. Because again, maybe that's why Modern Warfare 3 is still rumored to be the game that's supposed to be releasing this year, which is, I think, is super unfortunate. I'm not playing that game or investing in it. I'm not doing that.
Yeah, for anybody who doesn't know, Modern Warfare 3 is going to be rumored to be the full release, the next. Going to launch with zombies supposedly. So that'll be the big draw for that. But no,
I'm done. I'm going to pass. I will make sure I speak out against that, because I don't get the point in that, especially if you're making a Modern Warfare 3. Why didn't you just put that in the MW2
to finish the deal with Sony?
Again, and if that is the case,
they're not going to come out and say it, but that's the only thing that makes sense.
It's just so
only
fucking
thing that makes sense. Yeah, it is.
Whatever. Also got some rumors about the new Mortal Kombat game. Again, a little bit of spoilers here for those who are not familiar with how Mortal Kombat 11 story goes. Them rebooting Mortal Kombat and calling the next one Mortal Kombat 1. I hope it's not called Mortal Kombat 1. I hope it's just called Mortal Kombat, because why put yourself back through the numbering again?
Why not? Let's do it.
It's so weird. And I heard you guys talk a little bit about Mortal Kombat yesterday. Oh, the story's been kind of convoluted, or has been better recently. I do disagree that the newer games have done the story justice. I do miss that MK9, MK8, 7-6 era of Mortal Kombat, where they were having split offs, right? We got Defiance and other game Alliance and these other games that branched off and were telling branching paths of this story. I think the story elements were great then, because a lot of it was kind of just in line with each other. You knew what you were getting. You were getting the continuation. And then it kind of fell off the bandwagon to this whole time thing that they got going on. But I do think that this is going to be a correction in that storyline and getting back to the essence of Mortal Kombat, to tell a compelling story that can get people more invested from start to finish.
And I was just saying,
We'll
it still falls in line if they do it
Yeah,
this way.
100%. Yeah,
Not having Mortal Kombat 12, it still falls in line with how Mortal Kombat 11
yeah, 11 ended. Yeah,
ended. Right.
this was
Because
the
it's a
this was the
restart.
path.
It's a reboot.
This
It's a
was the
reboot
path.
of the world. Right.
This
So,
is Liu
yeah.
Kang's.
Yeah.
This is going to be Liu Kang's version of this
yes.
new future of Mortal Kombat.
Yes. Correct.
Essentially.
Correct.
Well, led, I should say.
Yeah, which works out perfect. So,
yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. That gives me a reason to really be interested in how Mortal Kombat is going to. For Mortal Kombat's one of the only really 2D fighters that I really love and enjoy playing outside of the more anime-esque ones, again, like Guilty Gears, BlazBlue, so on and so forth. I'd rather play Mortal Kombat than Street Fighter any day of the week, personally. So I'm interested to see that break out. The one thing that I'm not interested in is Peacemaker being bought in to be a rumor character. I really could give a damn less. Homelander makes sense if you know who he is as a character. Although I saw some people like overly excited about Homelander coming in. Yeah, that was kind of weird. But anyway,
again, DLC is DLC, and Mortal Kombat's always had fun and done it well. So
yeah, have a good time with it.
Whether I'm not interested in the characters or not, it doesn't matter. I just Ed Boon and his team know what they're doing, so whatever. Just let them do their thing.
State of Decay 2 got a new update that came out this week, which was super interesting.
Yeah, I got to re-download it. I got to play that for sure. Yeah.
And
huge update. Update 33.
Yes.
Update 33, changing how the zombies spawn, changing how the hearts spawn, changing fully the dynamic of the game. And this is huge. I mean, shout out to Undead Labs for continuing to support that game. That game plays nothing. If you haven't jumped into State of Decay 2,
one of those
recently, jump into it now. It's fantastic. It's great. They've again update 33, just unbelievable where that game's gone. But I've re-downloaded it. Planning on jumping into it at some point and trying it out. Weird West just got a free current gen console as well. Please go check that out. It's still in Game Pass, so you get the free update. They updated it for Xbox. They updated it for PlayStation. Underrated game from is it Wolfbane Studios? I think it's Wolfbane Studios. I know it's Wolf something. Wolfbane Studios. These are former In Exile and Obsidian devs. So they bring an awesome story. Freaking top-down old Wild West with supernatural stuff involved in it. Graphics are heavily shaded comic style graphics. If you don't know, it's now running at 4K 60 locked on the series consoles and on PlayStation. It was already a beautiful game and already performed really well before. Now I popped it in for a couple hours this week as well. Fantastic. Just a really good game, underrated game. Again, Game Pass, go check it out.
Nice.
What else? We also had the update for finally. Again, shout out to the devs, but Plague's Tale Requiem also got their 60 frames update this week as well. Still. For both PlayStation and
nice.
Xbox.
I did see that.
So now that's locked. Again, remember, that
Still
was a controversy. 30 frames or 45 unlocked if you wanted to. They've now locked it at 60. I've seen some people playing it. They lowered the resolution, which we always talk about. That's going to happen. They lowered the resolution down. It still looks beautiful, but it is a locked 60 now. So if you held off on playing Plague's Tale Requiem, guess what? Get to play it at 60 frames. So go check it out.
Oh, and it's best light, huh?
Yep. Absolutely.
We also got word that Hollow Knight Silk Song has been delayed. So shout out to Hollow Knight again. Game that seems all right. I can't get through the first game, so I'm not going to play the second game. No. That's unfortunate. That's
this
me.
Is huge. This is a huge game.
Huge game. Huge indie game. Huge indie game for a lot of people.
When it comes to indie games, this is like one of the biggest, if not the biggest game. Everybody's been waiting on this game.
100%.
And again, unfortunately for Xbox, another third-party deal. For those that don't know, it's coming in the Game Pass. Day one, day and date. Unfortunately, a lot of third-party deals that Xbox makes for a variety of reasons just don't work out. It sucks because this was supposed to be another 12-month game. This was supposed to be out by June. They didn't give a new date. They said they will talk to us later. So still a chance we could see it in the second half. But hopefully, cross our fingers because I know there's a lot of fans waiting on this thing. It's gonna be huge.
Yeah, it's kind of wild actually. There are some other little tidbits, like GTA 6 apparently going to cost about $1 to $2 billion. Again,
bro.
They're going to make a shit ton of money on that. And again, I don't. GTA 6 is also going to have online to it. You'd be smoking dope if you don't think that it is. It's not going to be a single player only game. So I'd imagine that that's where a lot of that money is going, making sure that they have another game that can at least live another decade. So.
That's great. That's Avatar money.
Yeah.
That's insane for a video game. If you want to know how far video games have come, if that's true, and we don't know it's true for sure, but if that's true, and I could see it with their marketing, because their marketing for GTA 6 is going, all their marketing is always stupid.
Yeah.
But their marketing for GTA 6 is going to be on another level. When they
they're going to make sure that it's in your face and that you buy the game. 100%. I mean, I'm going to buy the game. So it is what it is. I had my time with GTA 5. And then Private Division and Game Freak, Private Division from Take-Two and Game Freak, who is known for the Pokemon franchise, they're partnering on an all-new action-adventure IP, codenamed Project Bloom, which is going to be, again, to see the makers of Game Freak get from up under, from under Pokemon and get into something different. Again, Game Freak is extremely unique, and they have a lot of talented team there, but I do believe that they've been limited, to me, in my personal opinion, that they've been limited by their hardware for quite some time that they've been allowed to work on. So to see them put their expertise into something else is going to be interesting to see, and how they evolve those mechanics and what they bring to the table. See how things play out. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I think that is going to end our episode 102 of Living Splitscreen. We're going to get Pong up out of here. I want to say thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming on through and enjoying us on this Saturday morning. Again, our conversations were a little bit all over the place, but we touched on a little bit of everything, even had some passionate Skyrim conversations to start off the morning. So that was definitely interesting.
Yeah.
And now that I've talked through it, I think I'm good, and I'll be able to move on from it. I think that was the only thing that I was missing. I haven't been able to talk through it, so I keep going. I was thinking about downloading it again. I'm not gonna lie.
So thanks, chat, for being Steel's psychologist today and listening to his Skyrim issues.
God.
Glad we could all help him work through that. That's great.
Again, I am hyped for Starfield. There's a lot of interesting things that I'm seeing that really pull me in. So I'm definitely hyped for the show this year too. So with that, Paul, get these beautiful people out of here and let them know where they can find you, man.
Hey, man, listen, another unique show for Living Splitscreen. This is what Steel and I do. I hope you all enjoyed it. Like Steel said, again, after a long week where most of you are listening to other podcasts, you've heard the news broken down pretty much every which way possible by different podcasts. You come here Saturday morning, you get the Steel and Pong flavor. We take things all different directions. We might start the show off with an hour and a half conversation about things that weren't necessarily a part of our intro, but that's how we do here on Living Splitscreen. Hope you guys enjoyed it. It is a unique experience here, I believe, from our perspective, and I hope you agree too. But thank you all for joining us. Great conversations again. All of you that continuously show up here each and every Saturday morning, thank you so much for that. Pong Soul on Xbox, Pong Soul on Twitter. You guys know the drill there. Obviously, tonight it's the Shop Podcast. Yet again, PTK Blam seeing really finally good growth. I mean, again, it's unbelievable. Dude's one of the best in the business when it comes to hosting. He's been doing it for over 6 years, but really finally starting to see the chat grow, which is awesome because it makes the show more interesting. Of course, we don't care how many people are in the chat, but at the end of the day, when you got more conversation going on in there, people enjoying what's happening through the show itself, it just helps with the energy of the entire show. That's what it's all about. But man, do we have a good time Saturday night. So 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 o'clock Central Time, the Shop Podcast, PTK Blam, Fuzzy, myself, and tonight the one and only Wandering Dutch from the Midweek Mix-Up Collective. It's going to be like 3 a.m. his time, but he's going to show up. The man is a madman when it comes to this stuff. He shows up on shows all different times, but he's going to be joining us. We're going to have great conversations there tonight, so please drop on in. Next week, Tuesdays, All Good Things Green. Double Barrel Gaming is a channel. Mr. Boomstick is the man. Shout out to the one and only, one of the best in this community. 12 p.m. Eastern, 11 o'clock Central Time. Be there for Xbox Factor Podcast every Tuesday because he's got a great panel no matter who's on. It's going to be great conversation. Steel's been popping in a lot of Boom shows lately from time to time here. Always good conversations. Be there. Thursday nights, it's over on Fun Speculation Network, the Fun Speculation channel. It is PM in the PM, Pong and Mav in the PM, 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 o'clock Central Time, where Mav and I do this thing right here. Sometimes we have guests, but most of the time it's me and him, just like it's me and Steele, just BSing, talking, just catching up on the week. So be there next week, 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 o'clock Central Time for that. And then, of course, Friday nights, it's Xbox Ultimate's back on Fun Speculation channel, 10 p.m. Eastern, 9 o'clock Central Time. Had a great show last night where we laugh a lot. We talk about food. Mav tried to extend the show for another half hour talking about food, for God's sakes, man.
Yeah,
But we always have a good time. We have a great time there. We talk a lot of gaming news too. But that's every Friday night. Again, Xbox Ultimate. Otherwise, it's the golden age of gaming, people. It really, 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 really is. I can't stress it enough. So much to play, so much fun to be had, no matter where you're playing at. So get out there, play what you love what you play. Server Slam is on. Go download Diablo. Get in there. Anyways, have a great rest of your weekend. I'll talk to you all real soon. Steele, get us out of here, brother.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, beautiful people, you can find me everywhere. I still reign. That's He is a 7, and we'll see you next weekend on episode 103 of Living Split Screen. Y'all stay safe out there. Get some gaming in, and y'all have fun. Much love. Peace. Ow.